Good morning and welcome to the Tuesday, June 11, 2013 Board of County Commissioners meeting. We'll have an invocation by Stan Bowling, our Planning Director, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Alan Flakowicz. Please rise.
Let's pray. Lord God, this morning we freely admit belief and unbelief. We know that the way we live our lives reveals what we truly believe and what we don't believe. This morning, like every morning, there are two important questions that are before us. Have you spoken, and what have you said? We remember the father in Mark chapter 9 who faced Jesus, and he asked, I believe, help me in my unbelief. Today we ask that you open our ears, our minds, and our hearts. Let us be teachable. Help us to live out your word and what you are revealing. We ask that you guide our leaders to make decisions that bring about your good purposes and reflect your glory. And we ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. First item on the agenda is any additions, deletions to the agenda, emergency items. I understand there's one.
There is one, Mr. Chairman. The public notice of the presentation of the natural gas expansion by Florida City Gas scheduled for Monday, June 17th, 2013 at 1 p.m. in meeting conference room B1501, which is across the street in Building B. And hope all those can attend to hear more about the future of the expanding natural gas system in Indian River County. Thank you.
Chairman. Well, you've just
is that for the information agenda, or is that to authorization to advertise for the meeting, or what? Okay,
I believe it has to be announced since there may be more than one of us at the meeting.
Well, yeah, I agree with that, but I didn't know where it needed to be.
How about 10C2?
I'm good with that. Move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner O'Brien. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the consent. Gentlemen, anything?
Did you want to do proclamations and presentations, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, I would like to do that, but that's not how I have it listed here. I apologize. That was moved over. Nope, I have it now.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do the proclamations first.
If she can't return.
Thank you. As customary. A presentation of proclamation for the Retirement Award honoring Ann Powell, Indian River County Board of County Commissioners, Department of Utility Services, Water Distribution Division, on her retirement with 22 years of service. Ann, come on up. I see you have a few members of the department as well. And you're a leader.
Yes.
Thank you. Let me go ahead, Ann, and present this proclamation first. It's honoring Ann Powell on her retirement from Indian River County Board of County Commissioners, Department of Utility Services, Water Distribution Division. Whereas Ann Powell retired from Indian River County effective May 30th, 2013. And whereas Ann Powell began her employment with the county as a clerk 2 on March 22nd, 1991. She was promoted to account clerk 3 on October 8th, 1993, and on September 15th, 2000, promoted to secretary 3 position. On March 30th, 2001, her position was reclassified to a staff assistant 2, and Ann continued in her capacity until her retirement. And whereas Ann Powell was a dedicated employee and her work was greatly appreciated by the community, her employer, and co-workers alike, now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the Board applauds Ann Powell's efforts on behalf of the county, and the Board wishes to express their appreciation for the dedicated service that she has given to Indian River County for the past 22 years. Be it further proclaimed that the Board of County Commissioners and staff extend Ann Powell heartfelt wishes for her success in her future endeavors, duly adopted this 11th day of June, 2013. And congratulations, and that proclamation surely has some words but could not fully express our appreciation, our understanding of Ann Powell and the impact that you've had here in Indian River County in utilities. We often hear that individuals in the community have crossed your path, have heard your words, and have been assisted by you. And that's the reward. When you hear that, you know that the system is working, and the individuals that are tasked to be on those front lines are there for the citizens. So thank you very much for your dedicated service. In addition, we have a plaque. This is to certify that Ann Powell is hereby presented this retirement award for outstanding performance and faithful service to Indian River Board of County Commissioners for 22 years of service on this 30th day of May, 2013. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Now it's time to hear a little bit from Ann.
It's been a long 22 years, and it's been a very short 22 years. I've had a lot of good friends come and go. I'm the last of that little group of five that, we're known as the five old witches. But it was at a time when the utility was just getting started really good, and we've come a long way since then. We've actually entered the 21st century from where we were back then, and it's been fun getting there. I've had a lot of good times, a lot of sad times, and I've met a lot of great people, and I have a lot of good friends. And it's kind of neat to be in a place where you now know people by their first name. And I remember when Tim used to come into utilities, and we both had a different color hair back then, Tim. And Joe, you've been a godsend to me for the past few years, and so has my department. I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss the county.
Well, we're going to miss you, Ann, and I want you to know that I know that you did so much with so little, and in order to clear that out, I just want to say that all the tools that utilities have now, you didn't have back then, and you were still providing that high level of service, so thank you very much for your commitment to all of us and all the citizens.
Thank you.
And don't go too far. And yes, you have to take the plaque and run the gauntlet.
You have to earn it. Yes.
Thank you.
There's two. I have the plastic underneath to protect them.
Still in there.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Ann.
And you're going to put that on the wall in your grandma room.
Well, I have a me wall, so I've got a couple of others getting up to these, and but I'm moving to Melbourne to be closer to my family.
Good for you.
But I'm coming back down once a month. That group of girls, we have lunch.
You heard that, staff?
I thought they all lived in Sebastian with the old branches.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a presentation of a proclamation designating June 17th through June 23rd, 2013 as Amateur Radio Week. Commissioner Solari.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Is Mr. Vickers here? Hello, ma'am. Why don't you just give us your name and address for the record?
Okay. Christine Vickers, 729 George Street, Sebastian.
And I'm going to read this proclamation, and then I'd be happy to hear whatever else you have to say. I'm very happy to read this proclamation designating June 17th through 23rd, 2013 as Amateur Radio Week. Whereas Indian River County has more than 500 licensed amateur radio operators who have demonstrated their value in public assistance by providing emergency radio communications. And whereas these amateur radio operators donate their services free of charge in the interest of the citizens of the county as well as the world. And whereas the amateur radio operators are on alert for any emergency, local or worldwide, and are part of the Homeland Defense and regularly practice their communication skills. And whereas These amateur radio operators share their skills by teaching others and demonstrating their unique communication skills to the public during Amateur Week. And whereas members of the Vero Beach Amateur Radio Club will be participating in the emergency preparedness exercise known as Field Day on June 22nd and 23rd, 2013. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that June 17th through 23rd, 2013 be designated as Amateur Radio Week in Indian River County, and the Board urges all citizens to pay appropriate tribute to the amateur radio operators in our county. Adopted this 11th day of June 2013 and signed by all 5 members of the Board of County Commissioners. Good morning.
Good morning. On behalf of the Vero Beach Amateur Radio Club and Indian River County Area's Amateur Radio Emergency Services Group, we'd like to thank you for the proclamation. We have a lot of fun in amateur radio, but we also train and get licensed so that we can be of some assistance when the communication systems that are normally in place break down. So if anybody would like to see what that's all about, everyone is welcome to come to our field day exercise on the 22nd and maybe even get on the radio for a couple minutes. Thank you.
Where is that being held?
The Wabasso Causeway on the western end.
Okay.
You know, Mr. Chairman, I know that for the people involved, it's fun, and it truly is. And I remember, being small growing up and having the ham radios and getting some skip and talking to people that they said they were in Alaska. So they could have been next door, but But aside from the fun side, is truly let's hope that the services that that y'all are able to provide during a disaster, whenever we have perhaps what could be a Hurricane Andrew, where the street signs aren't even there, and God forbid that ever happened. But thank you for making it fun, I suppose, and preparing for those disasters. So good luck with it, and I'll try my best to swing by.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On that, thank you, Commissioner. Again, we all went through the hurricanes, and I want you to know that the Amateur Radio Club was there in full force, and quite frankly, not a lot of people that had responded to the EOC had fully understood what the amateur radio team was going to be able to do. And when we lost communication, we had communication. So thank you, and thank you for all the volunteers that call it a club. It's a lot more than a club, and we can count on you.
We're amateurs only in the sense that we don't get paid for what we do.
But you should. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a proclamation and presentation designating the week of June 16th through June 23rd, 2013 as Humanist Recognition Week in Indian River County. That will be presented by Commissioner O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there someone in the audience who's going to be accepting this? Would like to come forward? Good morning. Welcome. Could you give us your name for the record, please?
I'm Philip Katrovich.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kratrovich. I'll go ahead and read the proclamation. It's designating the week of June 16th through June 23rd, 2013 as Humanist Recognition Week in Indian River County. Whereas the Constitution of this land recognizes that all religious perspectives be treated equally, and whereas as a nation and community of citizens from so many diverse backgrounds and beliefs, the only way we can solve our problem is through cultivating intelligent and ethical interactions among all people with tolerance and respect. And whereas our nation and community face many problems, from creating jobs, educating our children, reducing violence, protecting our citizens, and guarding the integrity of scientific research, we must call upon compassion guided by reason to solve these problems. And whereas lasting legacies of the use of the scientific method and the power of reason have been left for the benefit of humanity by such great humanists as Dr. Jonas Salk, Dr. Albert Einstein, Dr. Carl Sagan, Dr. Isaac Asimov, and many others. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the week of June 16 through June 23, 2013, be known, designated, and set aside as Humanist Recognition Week in Indian River County in recognition of the contribution to the quality of life in Indian River County by the humanist community, adopted this 11th day of June, 2013. Mr. Katrovitz, would you like to say a word?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much. I'd like to say first, I came to this community 27 years ago, relative newcomer, but I fell in love with the place. I had no intention of staying here. It reminded me of Memphis when I was a young kid, and Memphis had 200,000 people. Now that it's in the millions and people are afraid to go out at night. I hope this county doesn't get that way. But at any rate, I'm an active member of the Humanists of the Treasure Coast. I'm also, the Director of Veteran Affairs. We try to make equal rights for all veterans, particularly down to West Palm Hospital. And I'd like to pose a question as to why we are here, and that is to recognize humanism. And most people are not aware of what humanism is. There have been some misconceptions. Author William R. Murray, when asked this question by a neighbor, replied that humanism refers to the affirmation of the worth and dignity of every person, a commitment to human betterment, and a necessity for human beings to take responsibility for themselves and the world. He also explained there are many kinds of humanism. Some are theistic, whereas religious humanism and its cousin secular humanism are non-theistic. The neighbor, surprised, stated, "Sounds like I'm a humanist too." Mr. Murray noted that in this broad meaning of humanism, millions of people are humanists who do not identify as such, and humanist values permeate our culture and institutions. And it seems to me like our Indian River County Commissioners are humanists. And an oath was taken to protect and serve our people and our environment from harm. I would like to express my gratitude for this proclamation and commend the commissioners for the work they're doing. It's been a good county to live in. These 27 years has become my home. Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome.
Mr. Katrovitz, thank you for your service to our nation as well.
You want to come on up?
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, the long-awaited consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull item D and H.
Item D, Delta, and H, Hotel.
Move to approve the consent agenda
Second.
as amended.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Commissioner O'Brien. D,
Thank you,
Delta?
Mr. Chairman. Item D is the recommended funding from the Tourist Development Council. I'd just like to point out that during the meeting, there was a shortfall of a few $1,000s, and that the Indian River and the Sebastian Chamber of Commerce both stepped up and reduced their funding request by the shortfall. And because of that effort that the chambers undertook to reduce their budget amount, that all the other, the Cultural Council, Historical, Bureau of Heritage, and Treasure Coast Sports Commission were able to get the funding they requested. So I'd just like to thank the chambers for stepping up and making that work out for all involved and benefit the entire community. So with that, I'd like to move approval of item D.
Second. Motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by myself. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Chamber.
And, Mr. Chairman,
H.
item
Hotel.
H is the contract with the State of Florida Special Olympics Aquatic Championship. And I just want to point out that this is the 8th consecutive year that the meet will be hosted here in Indian River County. And I'd just like to commend and congratulate our Recreation Department. They worked so hard to put this together. They organized hundreds of volunteers. And if you haven't been out there to watch these athletes compete in their Olympics, it's really a very moving weekend to be out there. There's always room for more volunteers. And I urge everybody to take the chance to get out there. It will be October 5th and 6th at the North County Pool, and it's just a real special event for us. And again, our Recreation Department works hard to put this together, so thanks to them. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I move approval of item H.
Second as well. And I just want to say, I want to thank my fellow commissioners for stepping up to the plate and volunteering during the Special Olympics. It's great to see everybody there. It's great to see all of you there. And it's just a very rewarding event. So thank you. Motion on the floor by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by myself. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item is public items. We have a public hearing, a consideration for the disposition of county-owned surplus properties for affordable housing. Memorandum dated June 3rd, 2013. This is administrative in nature and found on pages 53 through 63. Good morning, Mr. Keating.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Back in 2006, the legislature passed House Bill 1363, and that legislation required each county to do an inventory of all the properties that the county owned, and from those properties identified those that are appropriate for affordable housing. And for those that are appropriate for affordable housing, the legislation said that the county has 3 options. One, it can donate the properties to a nonprofit for use of permanent affordable housing, or it can sell the properties with the restriction that they be used for affordable housing, or the county can sell the properties and use the money for affordable housing. And back in 2007, the county did this exercise for the first time. And at that time, the county identified 10 properties that, of all that we own, 10 properties that were appropriate for affordable housing. That meant that they didn't have any other specific use tied to them and that they could be used for affordable housing. The board then decided to donate those to nonprofits. Several were donated to Habitat, several to Every Dream Has a Price, and several to Coalition for Attainable Homes. Since then, both Habitat and Every Dream Has a Price have built houses on most of their properties. The Coalition for Attainable Homes ended up transferring its properties to Habitat, and Every Dream Has a Price ended up returning a couple of properties to the county because the properties had challenges, and Every Dream Has a Price thought they were unbuildable. In 2010, we did the exercise again. As I said, the legislation required this exercise to be done in 2007 and then every 3 years thereafter. So in 2010, we did that and identified 2 properties that were appropriate for affordable housing, and the county determined it was best to sell those and use the money for affordable housing. It's now 2013, so it's another 3 years that have passed, so we're required to do this exercise again, and staff has recently done that. We have found that the county owns 458 parcels out there, and most of them we own, and most of them have specific uses tied to them. They're either for right-of-way, stormwater, conservation, parks, or a number of other public uses. We did determine, however, that 8 of the 458 are vacant properties that are appropriate for affordable housing. And there's a list of those properties that's in your backup, and it's an appendix to a resolution that's in your backup, and it's on page 63 of your backup. And just to tell you, of those 8 properties, 3 are in Fellsmere and 5 are in Gifford. This slide shows the 3 that are in Fellsmere. They're shown in blue. And this slide here shows the 5 that are in Gifford. Now, all of these properties have issues with them. And some of them are kind of small, some of them have some encroachments, and one of them has a flow well on the property. And the flow well's been capped, but the flow well would need to be plugged. Basically, after staff identified these 8 properties, we coordinated with Habitat for Humanity and Every Dream Has a Price, and neither of those groups wanted these properties because of the constraints that are on them. So essentially, of the 3 options, it doesn't appear that the donate to a nonprofit and use the properties for affordable housing is a viable alternative. For the same reason, it's probably not a good alternative to go and sell the properties with a restriction that they be used for affordable housing. So the last alternative, and the alternative that staff recommends, is to sell the property and use the proceeds from the sale for affordable housing. And in essence, what would happen is the money would be deposited in the county's affordable housing trust fund and used like SHIP funds, and the SHIP programs have been very successful in the last 20 years that we've been doing it, and staff feels that that is the best alternative. Now, the thing is, these properties, because they all have constraints, some are very small, some have the encroachment or the flow well issue, they're not going to generate much return, so we're probably not going to get much. And but we think the properties may have interest to some people and may have interest to in a budding property owner, particularly where there's an encroachment, or there could be potential buyers out there that think they can solve some of the issues. But the bottom line is that staff recommends that you open the public hearing, that you take public input, and that you approve the attached resolution, which adopts the list that's an appendix to the resolution, and the resolution also indicates that the lots are supposed to be sold with the proceeds contributed to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And that's staff's recommendation.
Thank you. Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, just real quick, Mr. Blackwood, I may have to abstain on this just based on the fact that these are maybe after they've become surplus. I don't know the method of disposition on this, but I did whenever we did this county surplus for the equipment.
Well, I don't think you're there yet.
Okay.
On this issue. It's pretty speculative.
All right.
So
Thank you.
I would say no.
I'll go on your word then. In that case, just real quick, Mr. Chairman, Bob, if we still have a flow well on there and it's capped, I don't think there are issues with the casings leaking. In my opinion, we shouldn't allow that to continue. We wouldn't really expect anybody else to allow it to happen. And so I know it's going to cost us some money to go ahead and plug that well and pour concrete down it, but I think it's the right thing to do. I don't know whether I have the consensus of this board to do that.
Well, Bob, don't we fund one or two a year to be able to do that?
Not anymore.
Actually, we used to allocate money that would be matched by St. John's for a well plugging program, but that was one of the budget cuts that we undertook probably about 5 years ago, and we have continued not funding that. But I think these pluggings cost $15,000 or so generally.
That's what I'm saying. And, yeah, and so it's the right thing to do. But it's going to be expensive, and quite frankly, I can see us trying to sell this piece of property and somebody knowing there's a $15,000 well that needs to be plugged on it. It's going to sound like a bait bucket full of crickets.
Bob, does St. John's still have their program that if we reinitiate, we could go back into their match program?
It's my understanding that they do not. I know Commissioner Davis was at a Agriculture Advisory Committee meeting. I think they said they do not have that program.
No, the St. John's discontinued it. They're looking. They had their budget cuts too. There is a move to try to reinstitute that. I'll go back again. Listen, it's something that we expect citizens to do of Indian River County when they own the properties. I think it's hypocritical for this commission not to do that.
If this was a privately owned parcel, would that be the case? They could not move forward without plugging it, correct?
We don't have any authority to require that wells be plugged. And capping takes care of the immediate problem. It just doesn't take care of the long-term problem. So the flow well is not out there flowing now. Right. It has been capped. It just has not been plugged, which permanently solves the issue.
But the question is, you're saying ultimately it has to be plugged, but could it be built upon being capped?
I think it could.
Is there county water available?
Yes, this is in Gifford. Water and sewer are available.
Other than that, I say surplus it and let's move on.
There you go. There you go. Well, this is a public hearing. So, gentlemen, no further comments? Public hearing is now opened. If you wish to speak regarding this topic, please come to the podium and identify yourself.
Is that what crickets sound like?
It's very similar, the crickets, yes. Okay. Here, or in a bait bucket, as you said that. I'd never had one of them like that.
Mr. Chairman?
Public hearing is now closed, seeing no one coming up.
Mr. Chairman, I move we surplus the properties and that we plug the well, not cap it, and use the proceeds out of that first, if we're allowed to. Then anything above taking care of that problem go to affordable housing.
On the individual lot or the
until we get it done. I mean,
okay.
You know, we've got a situation there, in my opinion, needs to be remedied. Mm-hmm. And if that's an appropriate allocation of funds, that's what I'm thinking.
Second.
Are we allowed to use the funds for that, Bob, do you know, or Alan?
If we're not, no. But if we are, I'd like to go ahead and try to make this as painless as possible and get these properties back on the tax.
I understand, but if the statute says the money has to go to affordable homes, then I don't know if...
I think you can, because this would be making the lot buildable for affordable housing.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're...
Okay.
Motion by Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner Solari. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a request for authorization to submit the FY 2013 grant application for 49 U.S.C. Chapter 53, Section 5307, Mass Transit Capital and Operating Assistance. Memorandum dated June 3rd, 2013, found on pages 64 through 73. This is legislative in nature. Good morning, Mr. Mattson.
Good morning. Phil Mattson, Indian River County MPO Staff Director, and I have for your consideration today a request to submit a 5307 Transit Capital and Operating Services grant. We have a resolution here as well that authorizes the submission of that grant. This is an annual process, and let me just say, this is the grant that makes the GO line possible. We have a lot of grants that we deal with. Some have varying level of matches. This grant will pay for 80% of capital to be matched, soft matched, by the state at a 20% rate. What that effectively means is capital is paid for at 100% for the GO line. This grant will also pay for 50% of the operating expenses for the GO line, with the remaining 50% to be taken care of by a state grant and local funds. Now, a few unique and interesting things about this grant. We're not allocated a direct number by the feds on this one. We're put into a pool of under 200,000 population cities known as the governor's apportionment. And then those cities fight over the funds that are put into this pool. So our population and ridership is taken into account in seeding the amount in the pool, along with our peer cities. But ultimately, we can get more or less than our targeted amount under this grant. We always apply for more, and we usually get it. We usually get quite a bit more than we are probably entitled to based on population alone, and that's because of the success of the system. Another unique thing is the number that I most looked at last year was not what the budget was, the appropriation level, new highway bill. It was what the census says in terms of us being an urbanized area. Are we still going to be under 200, or are we going to be matched together with the areas to our north and south, and then taken away our operating assistance? And fortunately, the census determined that we are our own urbanized area under 200,000. that means we're good for another 10 years in terms of qualifying for 5307 operating funding. Under the 5307 operating, they have a fairly liberal definition of what's operating. They allow preventative maintenance activities to be paid for through 5307. That's line itemed in here. Last year, fuel was also entitled to be capitalized. So it's a fairly liberal definition of capital and operating, and gives you some flexibility between the two. We could amend it at any time. We have ridership in excess of 1 million. I think you've heard that over and over again from us, and you know it's quite a successful program. We're very proud to have the operating partner, the Senior Resource Association, who does a fabulous job of this and has really run the most efficient system in the entire state. That pretty much sums up my presentation on what 5307 is, why we qualify for it, lays some concerns about what would happen in the future, and presented for you is how we use the funding. With that, it is a public hearing, and we'd have to take some comments from the public if there are any, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, and then we would seek a motion on this item.
Gentlemen, any questions of Phil before we open the public hearing? Public hearing is now open. If you wish to speak regarding this application, please come forward. Second bucket of crickets. Seeing none, public hearing is now closed. Gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman, I move staff recommendation.
Second.
That's a motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Solari. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a public discussion item. A request to speak from Fred Mensing regarding settlement of arms lawsuit found on pages 74 through 76. Good morning, Mr. Mensing.
Good morning. I'm here because of the vote that you took 3-2 not to come to some settlement of the issues that have been going on since, I guess in reality, legally, in February of 2008. I think I'm going to expose the flip side of this. It's a promise. It's also carrying out the terms of my wife's will, which stated that the issue over your taking the 60-foot was to be pursued with the most possible vigor. And it also excluded the right to bring an action against the present chairman of the county commission. He had met with her before her death and myself several times and has been a proponent of getting this issue settled. The flip side is, I promise you, there will be a lawsuit against the individuals who are against settling this, a few others, the Board of County Commissioners as a body, and the County of Indian River, and I'll be asking for $10 million. That will be co-plaintiff by my wife's son, Johnny L. Davis, Jr., and that is because the proposed settlements all require his signature, so he's decided that he intends to be a part of it. So anyone wishing for my timely death to stop the suit would not occur. Now, very simply, in February of 2008, and you have seen the facts, it was sent to Bank of America by Mr. Collins, your attorney. It was in violation, direct violation of the court settlement. If he wanted to send that fax, he needed to go through a hearing before the court and get that condition removed from the settlement. Therefore, it is a quasi-criminal act on his part, and since he was exclusively your attorney, the Indian River County is liable for his actions. I can't prove it yet, but there is implications that he did it again to Bank of America in 2009, and he did it to Wells Fargo in 2009. That would be a triple offense. I've been advised by federal authorities that had this offense been one of saying that I made $5 million a year income and I only made $50 a year income and I got a loan, they would prosecute civilly and criminally. By the same token, if the information furnished got me a loan, which was fraudulent, if it stopped me from getting a loan, it's the same offense. I've been advised that I am the one who must initiate that complaint. That would be a action against the county by the federal government, which I would initiate. I intend to do that if we can't get a settlement. That may be blackmail, but I'm sorry. I want this settled. I'm too old to have to keep fighting you people over something that I consider absolutely a height of stupidity. Now, basically, it boils down to this. You have a letter dated June the 1st from Manhattan Mortgage indicating that the quiet title action must be completed, signed off by the judge, and there has to be an agreement that someone, I'm suggesting Mr. DeBrawl, have the authority to release the liens, and that can be forwarded to Manhattan Mortgage so they can proceed. Because the special extension that we got in April is good for 90 days, we are the loser because we are going to have to accept a variable rate reverse mortgage where it was a fixed rate. Because there's not time, because of the slowness of this body in arriving at a settlement. Now, I've indicated from day one I intend to be made whole to where I would have been in February of 2008 when Mr. Collins stuck it to all of us. He was your employee as county commissioners. I realize, I guess 2 of you or maybe 3 of you were not here at that time, but the Board of County Commissioners, Indian River County, is liable for the acts of their attorney. And the only recourse you would have had is if you had given him instructions that he could not do such a thing. So, based on that, I expect, because of the difference in appraisals, which offsets things one way, and the fact the percentage of appraisal that the property would reverse mortgage for because of my advancing age, it increases percentage-wise the older I get, that you accept responsibility between 100, let's see where that is. We would have received $119,175 principal on the reverse mortgage back. The lowest we would receive today, and we have no valid appraisal, and that is based on the worst assumption that the appraisal came at Mr. Nulty's appraisal of property, would be $77,178. That's round numbers $32,000, $31,993. On the judgment held by, in the case of D'Amico versus Mensing, held by Fluff, which is a company owned by Mr. C.N. Carey, who, if you examine the facts, he is the one who is whispered in Will Collins' ear. He is the one who prepared all the maps, notes, and so forth that were used in the passage of the Resolution 2008-043. According to the records of the court, on July the 10th this year, that judgment is worth $87,337.96. Of that, I will accept responsibility for $60,000. That leaves you $27,000 in the judgment. As Mr. DeBrawl has been shown, there is a hole in the judgment. There have been no attorney's fees allocated. I am told that if this amount was satisfied before Mr. Stringer, the attorney for the current holder of that paper, files, that those charges would disappear. There are guesstimates that could reach $20,000. Basically, it looks like something around $85,000 on the part of Indian River County and getting some paperwork done would resolve this matter. If you're not interested in resolving it, I will know it today. I thank you for the way you did your motion Mr. DeBrawl furnished it to me, in which you said there would be no further negotiations, which opens the door to immediately going into court if we have to do that. I am not interested in pursuing it that way, but believe me, if I do, you will feel very, very dirty and ashamed of your actions. Are there any questions?
Gentlemen?
No. Mr. Blackwood, you got any advice for us or anything?
No, I think you had an attorney-client session last week. You were fully informed. As a result of that, you came out, rejected the previously discussed offers, and voted not to terminate further discussions. I think you should simply stand on that action. Okay.
I think it's a shame that three gentlemen have put their families at stake over this matter. I disagree with your attorney's opinion on the matter. Just because you discussed it behind closed doors, number one, you were not aware of the situation that Mr. Collins created, which violates apparently some federal laws according to attorneys at FHA, and you were made aware of that, and that just opens the liability much further, because I can take my action and I can get them to start their action. You know, it depends. You want to make a job for attorneys. And the other thing that I bring up, when you were promised a suit that reaches a point that you're going to have to reach your insurance carrier should be notified. This is from talking with the Department of Banking and Insurance. At that point, they normally get themselves involved in the middle. You're looking at somebody that is willing to bend over backward today, but I walk out today without the notice that we're going to move ahead on settling this thing, and the war clubs are out. Now, I suggest that each of you commissioners that voted against the idea give thought to it. I suggest that somebody put a motion on the floor to repeal that and approve a preliminary settlement pending Mr. DeBrawl and I sitting down and verifying all the numbers, and we go forward from that.
Mr. Mensing, we customarily do not, on public speaking requests, initiate motions to change orders. You realize that, and you have identified that there are three individuals who did not support the cause for you to be able to be settled. I don't want to discuss the shade meeting in its entirety. I don't believe that it's appropriate. It may be, counsel, it may be part of the future discussion on a promised lawsuit that may be coming our way. Whether I'm excluded or not, it's immaterial. I am representing the people of Indian River County, and such being the case, and with that in mind, I believe that the only way that we could have met was with that shade meeting. It's not behind closed doors, as you say. It's the only way that this board could meet with counsel to identify and discuss and strategize and then decide which way this action would be going. At that point, we returned back here and did vote, and it was 3-2 in support of not going forward with the settlement that you had discussed with Councilor DeBrawl. I will tell you that the first 2 pages, I will say that the first 2 pages looked promising, but then it started falling downhill after that. I don't know if Mr. DeBrawl would like to speak in regards to anything that I've just said or anything that should be said, but if not, I don't know if we can take any further action here at this board, bearing in mind the decision that has been made in the past meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to add something. Mr. Mensing has accused former county attorney Will Collins of wrongful actions, criminal actions, actions that supposedly the federal representatives from FHA would be upset about. Mr. Collins is obviously not here to defend himself on that stuff. I do want to comment that I have reviewed all of those actions, and I think Mr. Mensing is completely wrong. I do not believe Mr. Collins has done anything wrongful. He has certainly not done anything criminal, and I think anything he's done up to this point has been proper and protective of the county's interests.
You know, we have a violent disagreement on that, and there are probably as many people who would speak the other way to Attorney Plakowitz on that. I mean, we're either going to shake it out here, or we're going to shake it out, or we're going to get a commitment that is going to get shaked out at the next commission meeting. If you feel you can't take action, I feel that you can indicate that you intend to take action. Whatever went on behind closed doors was information I consider lacking at that time, and I don't think that the commissioners totally understand that this is not just a suit against the county. It's going to be against them individually, that their liability with sovereign immunity is $250,000. There will probably be questions that I will raise because of the different degrees of what I consider commissioners have done in error, that the county attorney is going to be obligated to protect the county, and he may not be able to protect the individual commissioners as their attorney. You know, I'm sorry, I think it's the cheapest way out for you, you know, and I don't intend to drag this out, but I do intend to carry my wife's wishes out, and it is a promise this thing will go much further if it doesn't get settled.
Mr. Mensing, personally, I don't disagree with much of what you said as far as this might be the cheapest way out, and it might be. And this might be the easiest way out for you, for the commission, for the people. But the vote is what the vote is, and nothing unusual has come up, and nobody's indicated that there's anything unusual that should be directing towards, I haven't heard of anything directing towards a change in thought process. You know how all of us voted, and you know where that will lay in the balance of your decision.
Nobody else feel, none of the three who voted against it feel that they want to reverse their vote? Speak up now. I assume that we're through then, aren't we?
I believe so at this point. There's nothing else further that we can do. We've already had our discussions. We've had several discussions on this topic. We've incorporated past council, present council, other councilors, and we've had several shade meetings in regards to the decision on your property. We've had several votes, and I believe that we have exhausted options here. Council, is there any other options that we have here? I don't believe so.
No, I think at this point everybody has staked out their position.
Yes, and I don't believe there's anything new and unusual that's going to be presented or could be presented. I appreciate your time, and I wish you the best in the next course of action.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mensing. Next item on the agenda is a request to speak from Diane Rossano regarding 82nd Avenue from 26th Street through State Road 60 regarding trucks and traffic, found on page 77. Good morning, Ms. Rossano.
Good morning. It's unfortunate that I had to go to this extreme, but I have been yo-yoed around.
I'm sorry to...
You need my address?
Name and address.
2235 81st Terrace, 32966, West Side Villas. First name is Diane, last name is Rossano.
Thank you.
I have been yo-yoed around through the whole county, from code enforcement to county engineering to public works to road and bridge, and everyone directs me to the sheriff's department. I don't believe it's the sheriff's department's problem. I think it's you guys. Whoever got this through on these turkey mines, it is a complete disaster. There are 70 and 80 trucks going up and down 82nd Avenue on a daily basis, and not one of them is doing 30 miles an hour. In any given day, there is, in February, the Sheriff's Department, and I'd like to thank them, and I commend them because I have become a thorn somewhere where they don't like thorns. And now it's your turn, and I'm not going to stop. I'm on a mission here. This is not safe. This is not realistic. 82nd Avenue has become the second State Road 60. You can't walk on it. You can't ride a bike on it. You can't even get in and out of neighborhoods. In February, there were 36 stops, 16 verbal warnings, 17 written warnings, 1 arrest, and 4 tickets. At this point, I'm hoping that we now move to zero tolerance on your little trucks going back and forth, and they're all going to get tickets. Because this is, are we waiting for someone to die? Is that what we're waiting for? This is a whole neighborhood that was not happy from the beginning, and I don't think any one of you have been out on that road to see what I'm talking about.
That's incorrect, ma'am.
That's incorrect.
I regularly travel that roadway, and I come from North County, and I actually travel, believe it or not, on that dirt road, that improved dirt road, and just for that reason, to see how this is progressing.
Well, we're talking 26th Street south to 60.
I have to get to State Road 60 somehow.
And so does everyone else in this town, and that's the road they're using.
And I don't generally see what you're... I'm not arguing with you, I'm just saying...
Well, that's fine. I'll just sit out there with a video camera.
Okay.
And if you want, I'll bring it to the next meeting and the next meeting. I have pictures. I have witnesses. I have the Sheriff's Department behind me. I mean, I have Captain Smith. I have Director Luther. I have Sergeant Iovino. They know me by my first name. It's ridiculous. I mean, I don't know what it's going to take, but the newspaper article back in August of 2012 stated that the trucks would only be heading south in 2 places. So what happened? Why are they going north and south? I mean, if you try to get out of my neighborhood, you've got trucks going this way. And I'm not talking 30, 35. I'm talking 60. I'm talking FedEx trucks. I'm talking R&L carrier semis. I'm talking board and milk trucks. I'm talking, you name the truck, it's on 82nd Avenue. I mean, this is a residential area. What happened? There's not enough of us?
No. I can probably help shed a little bit of light on this. I live out that way, so I do travel it as much, and I will admit, and I guess it's public record, that I got pulled over by Indian River County's finest, and for doing 40.
Thank you, Sheriff.
More importantly, thank you to the deputy.
Keeping us safe.
Thank you for the deputy. It was a warning, so I just, that's what but so they are doing their job out there. And
I know they are.
It has brought it to my attention, and I'm a little more cognizant of the fact that I need to pay attention to my speed. Living out there for 4 generations, I have seen the changes that you're talking about. Now, one thing that when you say that there's a boarding truck or a milk truck or those kind of things, some of the things that have changed out there is we paved 26th Street, and it is a convenient way for people to avoid State Road 60. Not necessarily for any lights or anything, just more of the traffic than anything. It's more of an interconnectivity than we've had in the past. With that being said, though, the state has moved, or they're moving forward with plans to connect that all the way to County Road 510.
Oh, wonderful.
And so the reason why I say this is what you live on there that I appreciate as thinking it was going to be a dirt road is in fact a part of the grid system for Indian River County. What does that mean? The grid system is what we plan for in the future as roads and get built that is going to be a north-south route so that people that want to go to Sebastian that may have to, they won't be taking the interstate or 66th Avenue or 74th Avenue because it's not going to be it'll be 82nd Avenue to go up to, let's suppose you wanted to go to Sebastian River High School. That will be the future route of which that will be, that you'll take. So now that's the bad part. The good part about that would be that as they make these improvements, that road should have sidewalks. I said. I don't know this to be a fact, but those improvements, because it is going to be a part of our grid system, and it is considered a truck route currently on our grid system, that the amount of traffic that's on 82nd Avenue is not going to decrease. Now, I don't know if that helped at all, but you're asking, where's all this traffic coming from? I'm going to say most of it's coming from the fact that we did pave 26th Street to the north.
No, most of them are the Turkey Mine trucks.
There are, without a doubt. But a lot of those trucks, if you look, they don't go in front of or along that portion of your house. I see a lot of them turning on 26th Street because they're maybe going back to the north.
Well, I'm going to bring you a video then.
Then that's fine. I saw it yesterday. I had to wait whenever.
Well, you weren't there this morning. They started at 6:30.
You're right. I come US 1 when I come down to the commission office.
And from 6:30 to 7:30, we counted 26 trucks.
Oh, I don't doubt that. No, I do not dispute that.
Well, maybe the county wants to buy my house.
Well.
Because I don't care what you do to that road, we are a residential area. And you're not going to change the speed limit. So how are you going to make these truckers do the speed limit? That's my question.
Well, and I don't mean to give you the runaround on this, but clearly that's why we fund the law enforcement arm of the Sheriff's Department. I mean, that's why we do that, is for this, to enforce those laws.
That's the only time they do the speed limit, is when there's an officer sitting on that road. It doesn't take an Einstein to figure it out.
Don't get me wrong. Of course, it didn't take me but one time to realize that I needed to slow down, too, though. So.
And you got a warning.
I did.
If you were just a regular person, you'd have gotten a ticket, I'm sure.
I would hope that wasn't the case. Well, I would hope that for doing 45 or 40 miles.
Well, we won't go there.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
We won't
Believe
go there.
me, I didn't hand him my business card, I promise you. So.
Well, we've had to pressure clean the fence into the neighborhood and the entranceway. You guys claim that everything is covered. Those trucks are not covered. They're coming in full. They're leaving full. Some are covered. Some are not covered. You're going to spend a lot of money from 26 to State Road 60 redoing that poor little two-lane road because these trucks are making a killing, man. They are going. I had one potential buyer who sat in the neighborhood and counted 70 trucks going back and forth. I'm never going to sell my house. I'm backed up to 82nd Avenue, and I'm destroyed because I don't even want to live there. Why would anyone else? None of you have to put up with this. That's why it was approved. When there's when there are other routes to take, why do you put residential areas in this position? I think I need my whole neighborhood here. Maybe that'll help. I don't know, but I am on a mission. And the poor Sheriff's Department has to hear from me at least 3 times a week. And it's not fair to them. You guys started it, not them. Why do I need to call the Sheriff's Department? For speeding? That's not the only problem. You're talking big trucks, semi-trucks. Now you're telling me it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
What do you believe is the best solution for this?
Reroute them.
Where?
Pick a road. Pick a road. You got 74th Avenue, you got 66th Avenue, you got 69th Street.
They're coming from the middle of 82nd Avenue. They only have but 2 ways out.
How do you figure they can make a left on 26 and take any street out?
They have to go to 26th Street or 20th Street or.
They're coming in on 26 sometimes too. They're coming from all over the place.
And it's not a full robust grid. There are only certain options that they have to egress out to where they have to get to.
Wild Turkey's approved hauling route is south on 82nd. They can take 26. They can take 60 to head east, but that is their approved hauling route. The other two mines approved hauling route is north on 82nd. But that's the approved hauling route. And you will, when we say that they're only allowed to head south, they come from the south, and they go in from the south, and they leave heading south. So they're going to be going in both directions. That's their approved haul route.
Mm-hmm. And you guys approve that, correct?
Yeah, and we dispersed it. We've got the other mines going in the other direction north on 82nd.
And this was not a haphazard decision, not because none of us live in that area. It was a year and a half through the P&Z. It went through this board, and there are 38 LDRs to ensure that the public safety is maintained through the operation of those mines, and those mines are called to task on a daily basis. And the minute we get a phone call, generally they see some activity in their area, and they see activity without the phone calls because they are monitored very carefully. Sheriff, you're here today. We've heard you mentioned about some activity there. Could we call upon you just to briefly discuss what is taking place there? I know that you've gotten some high compliments, and I want to thank you for your enforcement endeavors there and all the men and women who serve. Can we count on you in the future, as well as looking at the if there are any discussion of uncovered trucks or speeding? I know that there are several statutes at your disposal.
Number one, of course you can. Good morning, Commissioners.
I knew we could, Sheriff.
And, I understand that her concern, and we certainly appreciate her calling and bringing things to our attention. We've got, I have a record here of at least 8 different details that we've had in that particular area where we document all of the stops and all of the enforcement actions. So that is certainly on our radar, so to speak. And our commitment is to make sure that when any citizen calls, we address that issue. So we'll continue to monitor 82nd Avenue, regardless of which direction they're going. So appreciate your time.
Sheriff, would you be able to say that there is an inordinate amount of violations in that specific roadway, or basically it falls consistent with the rest of the arterial roadways?
I haven't studied it that concisely. I certainly can, but we have issues all over the county, obviously, and when community leaders or residents ask, we will concentrate on those areas until that issue is resolved.
Thank you. We expect nothing less, Sheriff, and thank you for your commitment as well. Thank you for the explanation.
So basically, you're just saying keep calling Sheriff's Department. There's nothing you're going to do.
Well, none of us have the capacity to address the situation. The Sheriff does have the vehicles, and we're seeing the new vehicles out there, Sheriff. They look very sharp.
I haven't seen them yet.
Yes, they're very attractive vehicles, and we have ample coverage. The Sheriff has enough personnel to address the situation, and I believe it will be addressed. None of us have the capacity to do that, and there is really no change to be made. And as Commissioner Davis indicated, that there might be an increase rather than a decrease as far as the truck flow or vehicular flow throughout 82nd Avenue. Although it's not a desired roadway since it remains mostly unpaved, I do travel it. I don't see the overt amount of vehicles. I do not live there. Admittedly, I do not live at. I know exactly where you live. Ironically, that was one of the old zones in which I worked when I was a deputy sheriff here in Indian River County, and spent a lot of time in enforcing in that area as well, in and around the church area, and where you reside. I can say that I've seen more vehicles than not, but I'm not seeing a runaway freight train here with open tarps and dirt flying. Are there violations? Sure, there's violations. There's violations throughout this county, and some will not tarp up, or the tarp will blow off. The vehicle must be tarped. The set of wheels must be down if it's loaded, must be up if it's unloaded, and the speed. And if the sheriff is enforcing all of those statutes, I think we'll have a better result. We can't do that from here. There's very little change that could be anticipated in the routing of those vehicles. There's very few places to go. they'd be turning into with the wilderness or farmland. They either have to come out to 26th or 20th, or keep on going to 20th, or go north as well. And as Joe Baird has indicated, after the permit process, the specified routes have been identified, and they're adhering to the identified routes.
Well, they may be, but not to this extreme. I mean, if you're telling me it's going to get worse, then I'm going to have to really crusade on this, because you can't get in and out of the neighborhood. I mean, I'm telling you, when the Grove trucks are running, you'll sit there for 20 minutes to try to make a left on 82nd Avenue or a right. But, like you said, nobody here lives there. It's very different when it's your backyard. I mean, I'm talking zoom, 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 zoom. From 6:30 in the morning till midnight. It's not the dump trucks, but the citrus trucks run at night.
Yes, citrus
Thank
trucks do
God
run
that's
at night.
over for now. But it's constant, and he can't have someone out there 24/7. I know that. You know that.
I know
Unless
that.
he's got an extra surplus.
Which he does not. But we do have
I don't think anyone does.
we do have the assurance from the sheriff, and there are ample deputies out there to ensure that enforcement will be done.
Well, I'll just keep documenting, and they'll keep documenting, and we'll go from there. I appreciate your time.
And I'll seek an update from the sheriff as well as to what the activity is in that zone.
Okay.
So we can best discuss this.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff, as well. Next item on the agenda is a request to speak by Audra and Bill Rigby regarding the equality and equal opportunity, found on page 78. Good morning, Mr. Rigby.
Good morning. Audrey Rigby, 8465 59th Avenue.
Bill Rigby, 8465 59th Avenue. Before I begin my presentation this morning, I'd like to say that I'm not here to represent any group or organization. I'm here only giving my observation for the last 30 or more years. But before I begin my presentation this morning, I would like to define a few terms. One, what does equality mean? The condition of possessing substantially the same rights, privileges, and immunities, and being liable to substantially the same duties. What does equal protection clause mean? That provision in the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which prohibits a state from denying to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. What does affirmative opportunity means? Positive chance for advancement. Let me remind you, I did not say affirmative action. I said affirmative opportunity. There's a difference. Mr. Chairman, I beg your pardon?
Yes, sir. No, I thought you had.
No, I'm moving on, Mr. Joe.
Thank you.
I've noticed that there's never been an African American / black as an aide for any county commissioner. But when it's voting time, you come to our community seeking signatures and votes. And that's a very easy thing to do. However, can you tell me, you cannot tell me that not one African American / blacks meet the qualification of being an aide to any county, to any commissioner on this board, or budget director, utility director, person director, county attorney, county administrator, or landfill director, or many other positions that I have not named. Let me go back a little bit. In 2005, the census for the enterprise zone statistics stated that 25% of the people in the Gifford area graduate from high school, go to college, and get a BA or a BA degree. So how is it that we don't see 25% of the Gifford community? And I'm only using the Gifford community now. I'm not using Oslo. I'm not using Wabasso, which is where I'm from. I'm not even using that data. I'm just using the data just from the Gifford area, because that's more of a bigger population. The Gifford community be represented. How is it that 25% of the Gifford community not be represented in this $30 million over budget facility? Some of you might call it, say what I'm saying, a race base. You could, but I don't call it that. I call it having an equal opportunity and affirmative opportunity at the economic table. And that's the only way that a community can grow. You got to have economic growth, and you got to have an affirmative opportunity, not affirmative action, affirmative opportunity. Mr. Chairman, we have a lot of chaos in our community, and that's because our young people today, they don't see equal and affirmative opportunity in their community. We have violence in our community, and more deputies in our community are not the answer. What we need in our community is, again, equal opportunity and affirmative opportunity, not affirmative action, affirmative opportunity. I'm saying affirmative action because when you use the term affirmative action, they used to use the term, say, well, quotas. I'm not here for quotas. I just want my children and my grandchildren to have affirmative opportunity, and that's the difference. We are shooting in the dark, and that's not going to change without quantitative data. What I mean by that, I got to have my representative in my area come and visit some of my meetings to see where we are. Let's sit down and talk and discuss how can we better our community. What do I mean by that? Okay, if there's a shooting and all of these activities are going in my community, what can we do to our young folks to move them forward, to get them out of the stalemate that they're in? Because I just believe that I visit the communities, I go out and try to find out why our young men, male black men, are getting in so much trouble. I go out and visit them. I go out and talk to them. A lot of them go out, seek jobs, show me where they have when they did jobs, and you know what happened? They don't get hired because of that record that they have. And I'm sure that collectively, we can get together and do better if we sit down to the table and let's discuss the economic of our communities. I'm moving on. What am I saying is that economic priorities are misplaced and is affecting the behavior and decision of our young people and are making on a daily basis. If you don't believe me, take a look at our local, statewide, and national community that is starving for economic opportunity, like the one that you have in your back door. And I guarantee that those communities are having the same problem that we're having here. And you cannot afford to ignore this as if it was not happening. You cannot afford to not allow people which pay their taxes that you don't respect and have a seat at the table of equal and affirmative opportunity. Taxation without representation is not a good thing. Parents, guardians, and especially mothers are sick and tired of this blatant disregard for the lives of their children. You have an opportunity to solve the festering problem before it escalates out of control. Mr. Chairman, Deputy Attorney, county administrators, and some commissioners stated that equality was given to capital sanitation. But after reviewing all the facts, I asked how. I know you're going to say that each businesses were given a fair opportunity in the application process. Let me remind this commission, one company is $11 billion strong, the other company is $13 billion strong. How is that equality? Capital Sanitation, Inc. only asks for justice, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, where my children and grandchildren can have equality and affirmative opportunity. And in closing, Mr. Chairman, I know that you're in my district, and I just believe this with all my heart, that we need to change the dynamic of how we do business. And what I mean by that, Mr. Chairman, is that you and I and the people of the community, we just need to get together and find a way how we can reach or do better in our community. The last time I looked in the 20-year comprehensive plan, everything due east of US 1 is in the comprehensive plan. If you look at the comprehensive plan again for the 20 years, there's nothing west of US 1 that is in the 20-year comprehensive plan for my area. I look at my area again, they say that I have to put in a petition to have my street paid. I live on 59th Avenue. My street has not been paid in over 35 years or 40 years. The last time it was paid was in 1977. How it was paid? Through a block grant. We don't, in my area where I live, there's nothing done without what? Block grant money. I was looking at something from 1977 when a block grant was for what? Demolition of homes, paved streets, and I think they did do some paved streets at that time. No paved street was in Whitfield subdivision. I think they paved the street where I live on, which was 59th Avenue and what they call Broxton Road. Since that time, I think the only time that the paved street is now is because of the water line that's going through now. Streets have been resurfaced again. But I believe, Mr. Chairman, that if we can find a way that we'll all sit down together, come as one, not because, we all know that meetings get heated sometimes, and we're all not going to agree on everything. But I believe that if we can sit down to the table, find a way, find a solution, how we can better the problems in our community. I just don't believe we will have all the problems right now that we have in our community, the shooting, all the disarray that's going on in our community. If we sit down to the table, you visit me, I visit you, Mr. Chairman. Let's find out what we can do. We have a progressive civil league in our community. You come and visit our progressive civil league, and let's see the ways and means that we can better our community. I just believe it. It's going to get heated sometimes. We all got thick skin. I believe that. But we can sit down and discuss ways and means of how we can reach our children in that community. And you know what? I believe that because I have asked them invite you and let you hear some of their concerns. And then if you hear some of their concerns, I'm sure we can collaborate. We can come up with solutions where equality and affirmative opportunity is for everybody. Not just for the few, but for everybody. And I just believe in my heart. 2000, this is now June. We got July and the rest of the year. If we sit down together, Mr. Chairman, we can come up with something. I just believe that. It's going to be heated, but we can come up with something better than what we got. I just believe that. I just thank you for letting me speak today on this topic. And I still believe in my heart that things can be better, Mr. Chairman, if we sit down to the drawing board. Let's discuss these issues openly. Get involved with the community. Get involved with the organizations in our community. It can be better. I just believe that. But opportunity is for everybody. And the way that it's designed now, it's not. But I'd like to ask one question, Mr. Chairman, if I can, please. And maybe you can help me out on here. I just got this report from the EEOP short form. actually what it stands for, the Economic Employment Opportunity Program. And on this sheet right here, it has what here, it says that Jason Brown is the contact person, the grant type was a local government agency, and the grantee name was Indian River County Board of County Commissioners. Now, the reason why I'm asking this is that if you notice up on the top, it says grant amount, $57,934. Then below here, another grant amount, and I think it's going to the Sheriff Department. I'm not sure of that. And the grant amount here was $13,563. My question to you, Mr. Chairman, is this, the $53,000 and the $13,000, is that grant money? I mean, I know it's grant money, but what is that grant money to use for? Can you tell me?
I think if you sit down with Jason, Jason would be glad to explain to you everything on that chart. I mean, for us to sit here, you know, we get a lot of grants and those little ones. I don't want to answer or have anyone answer up here and it be incorrect. So just contact Jason. He'll be glad to give you that information.
Okay.
There's quite a bit of grant release on there, and some of the grants that you did not discuss on the CDBG grants were the water and the sewer that also subsequently has been given. I did during the conversation, given attention. During the conversation, you had indicated that, you know, it was years past, but no, there are currently grants that are moving forward to ensure that different areas and quality of life concerns are being met through the CDBG grants.
Well, I understand that, like the water project and the sewer.
Yes.
I understand that, right.
And you know that we worked hard with that, and it almost failed. And it was a lot of work between the CDBG grant and the SHIP program, and we getting it done. As far as your opportunity, you mentioned a few things. As far as your opportunity, you know how I felt about your opportunity, and I think you identified that I did support you. In the design and plan stage, you most certainly were a very strong, committed individual, whether it's Capital Sanitation, Inc., or Capital Sanitation, I don't know which one it was, but you were committed to do the work. There was other shortfalls. And the same way as I want to say about what you're indicating today about equality and opportunity, I believe the mindset is there. I believe that we can talk, we can sit down, we can hash out the issues rationally, and in the end result, some of those issues will not be resolved because there are certain factors that are being left out. So, but as far as opportunity and equality, I'm happy to discuss them with you.
I want to, Mr. Chairman, there's one other thing that I would like to ask the attorney, if all possible.
Sure.
When you are selecting grant money, and Mr. Chairman, is that what is the threshold? What it could be for the attorney? I'm sure you can't answer, Mr. Chairman, but it's for the attorney. But I'm addressing it to you.
Thank you.
But what I'm saying is that the threshold for a grant, I know under the auspices of the county, there's a certain threshold that you can follow the county ordinance when you're applying for grant. That means that, for instance, like, let's say you got a grant for $50,000 or more. I know that with that grant, you don't have to follow the federal guidelines. You can follow the local ordinance that's set forth by the Board of County Commissioners. My question is, what is the largest amount of thresholds that we're in is that you have to go follow the federal rules and regulations? What is that threshold amount?
I'm not sure you've asked the question properly. At least based on my limited understanding, let me start there. Most of the grants we get, for example, federal grants, we don't define the purpose. They create a grant program to meet some need that they've identified. So if we have some project in Indian River County that we think falls within that the grant criteria, we can apply for it and receive the grant. Now, once we receive the grant, we enter into a grant agreement that grant agreement has all kinds of terms in it that require us to follow certain federal laws, and we do follow those federal laws. There is a point below that where the federal law does not have an interest in applying, and we can then apply our local laws and our state and local laws. And I'm not sure if I've answered that question right, but we're not in the driver's seat on most of these grant programs. The party, whether it's the federal government or the state government that gives out the money, sets the criteria, terms, and the requirements that we have to comply with generally. And then if we put forth a program which they like, then they award the grant to us. In most cases, grants are not just given, they're awarded. So we have to show them a project which they think meets their criteria and will be successful and will have an impact.
So let me understand this. If, for instance, that if a contract or grant, let me use the word grant, is $100,000, let's say the federal government give you the criteria of the guidelines that you must follow for that $100,000 grant. My question is, I'm trying to specify a little clearly. If the government is giving you the amount of money for that contract, plus it giving you the guidelines that you must follow in order to have that grant money, my question is, what is the maximum amount that you have just used when you said that they can use, and the local government can come in now and use their own policies and their own rules? When does the federal government comes in?
That varies in the requirements of every grant. The grant sets those requirements, not us. The grant, so we don't set them. They vary from every grant.
Well, you answered my question. There's one of the things off the cuff, and I'm finished. I know that in 2014, that the current contract is coming out on to be awarded. And I'm just throwing this out in the air. And I know that right now there's a lot of questions about the pipelines and the gas line that's coming through this county and in River County. I also believe that in the current contract, possibly, that you might use language as, well, I want certain haulers or whomever, I'm going to assert points to help build whatever I need to do and for these pipelines. I'm just throwing it out there. Listen, I didn't say it's going to happen. I'm throwing it out there. And the reason why I'm throwing it out there is because Sebastian just did the same thing. That's why I'm throwing this out there. And I was told in a meeting that it's predicated upon what happens with this franchise. I'm just praying God and hoping that that does not happen with this contract. That you award points
based on pipe
location and location in the current contract coming up. Because if you do, that is what you call extortion, and again is what you call bribery. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm throwing it out there in the air and hoping that do not happen. I'm praying God that do not happen. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Rigby. Thank you, Mr. Rigby.
I'd just point out to you, next week is when that natural gas franchise agreement comes before this board in a public hearing.
We're aware of it.
So if you have interest,
I'm aware of it.
Okay, if you have interest, you can certainly appear.
Okay. Thank you, Alan.
See you next week. Thank you. Gentlemen, before I get a request, we'll take a 10-minute recess.
Like that?
think the hard part's over. Okay. Yeah, I think the hard part's over. It looks like everybody's having to go to work and everything, too.
Yeah, I don't think you even have to speak. Thank you. I know that, but I think we're going to the movies today.
Leona, how you doing? Good. You know it's going to get bad whenever I start playing solitaire on my phone. No, I haven't yet.
And if you do, deal me in.
Yeah, there you
It's
go.
like a little postcard game or something every day.
Yeah, I got plenty to do. I mean, we got. Well, I'm pursuing that. You know, and I'm getting tired of stupidity. I mean, I don't mean it that way, but we live on paved roads.
Roland, how are you doing? You're going to miss all this, aren't you? Well, I still have to dive back to the tree go. I didn't say you were there. Yeah. I know Bob was ready to stack some books here to make his diatribe, but I thought, be graceful. Oh, I know. And this way, we look good. You just read it and we're done with it. And let him do his thing. Yeah, I said, no, it's not a 5 now. I got the same problem you do. Yeah. There is something. It's almost right here. Big deal. Yeah, so I think it'll just make the mayor look even worse.
They put a lot more salt on there, I think.
Commissioner Flory, I got your seat all warmed up with some knowledge here for you. Thank you. Can we give you a little wisdom?
That's supposed to tell you that chair's having it in quite a while, didn't I? Oh no. Oh no. Poor beers.
Being as restrained as I've been today, I would have thought I'd get a little more credit. Which time?
You disappointed me on this note. You disappointed me. You're not standing by your values. I'm just kidding. Look.
Who didn't sign the damn proclamation?
Just joking.
I stood by the values.
No, I'm
the
just
only one of us
joking.
here. So don't give me that.
What's that?
Did you sign the proclamation?
No.
Oh, so good. I didn't know we did. Most of it.
I did sign it by mistake. Because Laura's like, can you hear him sign all these? But no, I was a non-signatory. Ellen has the other.
The meeting will now be called back to order. Thank you for all in attendance. The next item on the agenda is public notice items. And Councilor?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have two notices this morning. The first is notice of a scheduled public hearing on June 18, 2013. That's a public hearing to consider granting a franchise to Florida City Gas to distribute natural gas within the unincorporated area of Indian River County. That's an administrative matter. And the second is notice that a presentation will be held by Florida City Gas on Monday, June 17, 2013, at 1 p.m. at the Indian River County Administration Building B Conference Room, room B1-501, regarding the expansion of natural gas. More than one member of the Board of County Commissioners is expected to attend this public meeting. For more information, call the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners office at 772-226-1490.
Thank you, Councilor. Next item on the agenda is departmental matters. Community Development, the request for board approval for an agreement with Grand Harbor Community Association, Incorporated, for improvement and maintenance of the boat club, a.k.a. Spoil Island, Indian River-25. Memorandum dated June 3rd, 2013, found on pages 80 through 101. Good morning, Mr. DeBlois.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I'm Roland DeBlois, Chief of County Environmental Planning. As indicated, I do have a brief PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you.
This does have to do with what's known as Boat Club Island or Spoil Island number IR25. The island, it's about 6.5 acres, located about a half a mile north of Grand Harbor Marina on the west side of the Intercoastal Waterway. The history of the island, just briefly, from the 1960s through the mid-1990s, there was a local group known as Vero Beach Boat Club that maintained boat docks and picnic facilities on the island. In the mid-90s, the boat club asked the county to take over management, which it did under an informal agreement with the state. The island is owned by the state Board of Trustees. More recently, in March of 2010, the county entered into a formal submerged land lease for the south, approximately 1 acre of the island, to maintain facilities on the island. Back in 2004, when we had the hurricanes here in the county, the docks were damaged. A pavilion on the island was destroyed and removed. And part of the lease agreement is to eventually get back to restoring it for use. This graphic on the overhead shows the location of the lease area. It's about a half acre or 0.6 acres of uplands and about 0.3 acres of submerged bottomlands, including 3 dilapidated docks in the area. And here's kind of a close-up of the leased area and the docks. Recently, Grand Harbor Community Association representatives approached the county and stepped up to the plate and volunteered to essentially adopt the island area, the lease area, to help with costs to repair the docks and to maintain the islands. And based on that, staff has drafted a proposed license agreement to allow for that adoption and partnership with the public to maintain the islands. In looking at the matter, we reassessed the cost for repairing the docks. In talking with the community association, we all felt that the best approach would be to fully repair the southernmost or longest dock, which is about 150 feet long, and remove the other 2. The docks are currently 3 foot wide, so they probably need to be rebuilt to a minimum of 4 feet, which is what the current requirements are. Also looking at the matter, we found that the Florida Inland Navigation District has a special grant program called the Small Scale Spoil Island Restoration and Enhancement Program, which is specifically geared towards Spoil Island enhancements. It's a $7,500 grant cap on each project. If we apply for that as a county and get the grant, which staff feels we will get, and then couple that with cost share with the community association 50-50 on the remaining costs after the grant, we conclude or estimate it would cost about $7,250 for the association and for the county to fully repair and remove the docks to make them more usable. In the license agreement, or the agreement that's proposed, other aspects of it is the county would get with the association to look at the upland facilities, maybe do some picnic improvements such as picnic tables or grills, and cost share those improvements. The association, under the agreement, would voluntarily keep the property cleaned of trash and small debris, keep a log of their public service. Under the agreement, they would have liability insurance just to cover their activities on the island. and the term of the agreement as structured would be concurrent with the county's lease with the state. In the end, staff feels this is a win-win situation, and we recommend that the board approve the agreement and also authorize staff to apply for the fine grant. Thank you.
Commissioners.
Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead and move staff recommendation with one caveat. Our 5-year lease expires in less than 2 years, Roland. Before we put any money into this, can we get with the state and see if we can extend that lease? I'd hate to put some dollars into this and then not get that lease renewed. So I'd like to
we can contact the state to see if we can get some insurances up front.
Okay.
And kind of on the opposite end of that, I understand what you're saying, but then again, if we are going to lose lease, I'd just assume must be able to put these improvements in before they tell us we can't at the state level. So it's, you know, I don't know which way to go, but I understand what you're saying. If it's almost ask for the extension if we can get it, and if they say no, then let's get it done within 2 years. How's that?
Okay, that'll work.
Second.
That was, I thought that was a second. Sounded like a second.
Yep.
All right. And the motion and second is in alignment. Gentlemen, any further discussion? Nope. Motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Davis. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Roland. Next item is consideration of acquisition and disposition of block property, memorandum dated June 3rd, 2013, found on pages 102 through 105. Morning, Mr. Keating, again.
Back again, Mr. Chairman. Let me start out giving you a little history on this item. Last year, in 2012, the St. Johns River Water Management District prepared a lands assessment implementation plan. And the purpose of that plan was for the St. John's to inventory all the properties that it owns throughout the district and determine if all of those properties needed to be retained by the district. Generally, if the district could actually get rid of some of those properties. Overall, the plan found that 92% of the 618,423 acres that the district owns are needed to be kept for the district, that it furthers the mission of the St. Johns River Water Management District. For those that aren't retained, there are really 4 alternatives that the district had. One is to donate the properties to local government with a conservation easement. Another is to sell the properties with a conservation easement. A third is to surplus them and just sell them for development or any other purpose. And the fourth is to retain them for an alternative use. Now, of the 100,000 acres or so that St. John's owns in Indian River County, the Lands Assessment Implementation Plan identified only 2 parcels comprising about 32 acres that the district indicated that it didn't think that it needed, felt that it didn't serve the district's mission. And let me just show you those 2 parcels. They're shown in this map. The 2 parcels together constitute what's called the block property. And they're just north, one's north and one's south of Hobart Landing. And just to orient you, a little east of US 1 and north and south of 79th Street. During the process of preparing the Lands Assessment Implementation Plan and going through the public input process, the Hobart Landing Property Owners Association got involved with the district and actually gave the district some history on these parcels. And the history is kind of interesting. One of the residents up there a number of years ago purchased these 2 properties for conservation purposes. And then that person sold those, or really didn't sell, conveyed those to the Nature Conservancy with the expectation that the properties would be used for conservation forever. And then eventually the Nature Conservancy conveyed the properties to St. Johns River Water Management District. And in these various conveyances, there was never a conservation easement put on these properties. Therefore, there's no protection of the properties for development purposes. After or during the public input process for the land assessment implementation plan, the St. Johns River Water Management District was kind of amenable to the Hobart Landing Property Owners Association's position. And eventually there was a meeting between the Hobart Landing Property Owners Association, the Indian River Land Trust, and county staff. And what was discussed at that meeting was that the Land Trust, which also owns property in this area, they own some property just to the north of 79th Street that abuts the northernmost of the two parcels constituting the block property. So the Land Trust already has a presence in this area, and they have some trails on their property and on the St. John's property. So the Land Trust was a logical entity to be involved, and the Land Trust indicated that it would take title to those properties and manage those properties. The problem that came up is that St. John's was not legally allowed to transfer the properties to a non-governmental agency at less than market value. If the Land Trust was going to directly get the property, they'd have to pay what the properties are worth. So in discussions, the outcome was everyone agreed that conceivably the county could take title to the two parcels and then convey the properties to the Land Trust. Now, one hitch here is that the St. John's incurred some costs when the St. John's obtained the properties from the Nature Conservancy, and the total costs come to $86,000, and St. John's indicated that as part of the process of conveying out the properties, they want to be made whole on the expenditures that they have. In discussions, the Indian River Land Trust indicated that it would pay the $86,000. So essentially, the plan that was worked out with St. John's, the Land Trust, and the county was that the St. John's River Water Management District would convey the properties to the county, with the Land Trust paying the district the $86,000 that the district had expended to obtain the properties, and then the county would convey the properties to the Land Trust at no cost. Now, as part of this, the St. John's River Water Management District would, as part of the conveyance, include a conservation easement on the property. The conservation easement would indicate how the property would be used, and there'd be a reverter as part of that conservation easement that if the properties weren't used consistent with the conservation easement, they would revert to the district. And the expectation is that the county, in conveying the properties to the Land Trust, those properties would have the conservation easement, and there'd also be a separate agreement between the county and the Land Trust that the Land Trust would do those activities that are needed to meet the requirements of the St. John's, such as maintaining the property, monitoring, and doing regular reports that the St. John's River Water Management District will require as part of the process. Actually, today, the St. John's River Water Management District is meeting, and the St. John's board is going to vote on this issue. St. John's is, the staff is completely on board with this proposal, the acquisition of the property by the county, and then the conveyance of the property to the Land Trust. And the expectation is that the board's going to approve that today. So at this point, staff recommends that the Board of County Commissioners approve the county acquisition of the block property, with the Indian River Land Trust paying St. John's the amount of money that St. John's needs to be whole, and to approve the conveyance, the subsequent conveyance of the property to the Land Trust, with the conditions that the land trust maintain and manage the property. And staff also recommends that the board authorize the chairman to execute any necessary property documents and authorize county staff to take any actions that are necessary to facilitate the property transfer. I do want to indicate that we have several people here. Ken Grudens and Ralph Monticello are here from the land trust, and I think there's one or more Hobart Landing property owners representatives here. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I've got one question, Bob. Oh, Mr. Chairman.
No.
The $86,000, which entity incurred that?
The St. Johns River Water Management District incurred that expense when the conveyance occurred between the Nature Conservancy and St. John's. I think it's for surveys and closing costs, things, and title insurance, anything that would be required for closings.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman? Bob, if the district were to just sell the land outright, would it still be sold with the conservation easement on it, or would they sell it as highest and best use?
It's my understanding that in this case, they had determined that there was no reason to maintain a conservation easement on it, that it didn't serve the district's mission. So I think they were going to surplus it and just sell it for highest and best use.
Okay.
I do want to make one more point. The northern property has mosquito impoundment on the east end, and the St. Johns River Water Management District has an agreement with mosquito control to manage the impoundment, and that will continue when the property is conveyed to the land trust.
Okay. I don't know if Ken or the homeowners want to speak, but I'd like to publicly thank them, the land trust, for stepping up and offering to cover the cost of this acquisition, and just kind of commend everybody on putting this together that I think is a win-win for the community and the county. So just, if you guys want to come up and speak, or...
I'd like to comment on that, too. I really like the relationship of how things have evolved here as far as some of these properties. I'll equate it similar to the Humane Society, as well as even in the Soccer Association, and how we've got these relationships that have evolved with these groups and organizations that have the burn and the desire for their mission. And really, the county is able to facilitate that and then get out of the way. And I like that. I like that. You are doing a great job, in my opinion, as far as conserving properties, purchasing them, but more importantly, as someone that owns acreage, the cheapest thing sometimes about property is purchasing it. It's the in perpetuity maintenance of it that gets expensive. And y'all have the volunteer system that have the burn and the desire and the mechanisms in place to be able to do this. And it's evolved into, in my opinion, a very win-win beneficial relationship on both parties' behalf.
Thank you.
For the record, Ralph Monticello, Director of Land Protection, Indian River Land Trust. I live at 1681 28th Avenue, Vero Beach. This is, the Land Trust operates the Tony Robinson Waterfront Trail. We have a public entity on the property just north of the northernmost property, and this is a public facility. It's a walking trail just south of the Wabasso Bridge, and we intend to use the Hobart Landing neighbors as our volunteers to work in cooperation with managing the property for us. We will be doing a management plan on the entire property sometime this year. This leads to, it's part of a number of cooperative ventures we've had with the county and the county staff and the commission. This past year we opened the Lagoon Greenway, which many of you were there for the opening, and this is a cooperative project for public access for the community on joint projects with the Land Trust. We look forward to doing this additionally at the Spoonbill Marsh in the future. We own the property north of the Spoonbill Marsh, and there's some talk about getting more public access, which the Land Trust would be taking care of the public openings for that for the public. So this would be a third. We'd have one north just south of the Wabasso Bridge. We have one just north of Grand Harbor, and then you have another walking trail for the public just in the McKee Gardens vicinity. So we're pleased to work with the county in these ventures. Does John or anyone from Hobart Landing want to talk?
Hi, County Commissioners. I'm the President of Homeowners Association, Hobart Landing, John Lambert. Bob Keating spoke about the history of the property. It was of note the property was bought by Lucia Bravo, who is she happens to be one of the Hobart welding heirs that made KitchenAid Hobart welders, and she was nice enough to buy that. At one time we wanted to gate the community, and the county lawyers at that time, this is probably about 15 years ago, said that needed ingress and egress to those two parcels that she bought, and she bought those in I think 1999 for the cost of $600,000, and then donated them to the Nature Conservancy. So there was quite a bit of expense on her part, and fortunately she was able to afford that. So we're very happy to join the Indian River Land Trust and partnership with that and keep the property in conservation. And I appreciate if the county would look at that and vote in favor of this going through. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
John, if I may,
Yes, sir.
You're the gentleman who called me up the other day, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for that conversation. Mr. Lambert called and gave me the background that Bob's given today, which I was totally unaware of. So I thank you very much for that. And I think the key is something that both Bob and Mr. Lambert brought up, is that it was originally private sector dollars which paid for this property with the goal of leaving it in conservation, and no public dollars were used. And given that, I think it's perfectly appropriate for the board to go ahead with the staff recommendation today and help with the transfer of the property from the St. Johns River Water Management District through the Indian River County to the Indian River Land Trust.
Second.
And I'll go ahead and make that in the form of a motion. And again, I want to thank you very much.
Thank you.
We get a lot of phone calls from different constituents, and some are not so happy, and some are not the most pleasant. But yours was just very even keel, very articulate, and had a lot of useful information. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, it's funny, all the calls I get are good.
I get all nice ones.
I don't know what
It's
you're
just
doing.
whether they talk to me first or Commissioner Solari.
I don't get the stones in the car windows that you all get.
You're the only one that gets those cranky calls.
Yeah, or either that or you make them that way. I just don't know which.
There's a 12-step program for that. I got to let them get that out once in a while.
Well, that was. I mean, just we're talking about wiffle ball.
Yeah, I know. But I'll take it.
Well, we have a motion on the floor in a second. Ken, would you like to just say a few words before we take that actual vote? You're an integral part of this process. I think we can cast the blame and the thanks for many individuals, but in looking at the book, your picture most certainly always comes to mind.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Commission. The Land Trust is very excited to be a partner with the county, and we're partnering more and more and collaborating more and more with agencies and other organizations, and it's really beginning to show how fruitful these partnerships are in working together to acquire these lands, provide access to the public, as Ralph mentioned, and also to improve these properties for fish and wildlife habitat and to maintain our scenic qualities of our lagoon. So representing the entire board and staff of the Land Trust, I want to thank you for all of the work we've done together, and I, too, thank you for your upcoming vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you for all your hard work, too. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? With that, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Solari and seconded by Commissioner Davis. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. Next on the agenda is county matters. County Attorney Matters, which is the initial review for consideration for impact fee suspension and ordinance permission to advertise for a public hearing. Memorandum dated June 5th, 2013, found on pages 106 through 111. Yes,
Councilor. Mr. Chairman, back on May 21, 2013, the board voted to instruct the county attorney to prepare an ordinance which suspended all impact fees for a period of 18 months, and then reinstated the impact fees in 25% increments quarterly thereafter, and to bring that back for initial review and consideration, and that's where we are today. Historically, since the downturn in the economy and starting in 2009, we've had 5 temporary suspensions of impact fees. There's only one currently still in existence. That's 3 impact fees for public buildings, correctional facilities, and solid waste facilities, which are currently suspended through March 31, 2014. When I prepared this current ordinance, it occurred to me as I was preparing it that while the board had said suspend all impact fees, I wasn't sure if you intended water and sewer impact fees. I did talk to the chairman whose agenda item led to the board's vote, and we decided that probably that was not the intent of the board, so I've prepared the ordinance without water and sewer impact fees being suspended. But on the other hand, we wanted to bring it to your attention so you'd be aware of it if you thought differently. Second point I'd like to make is in suspending all of the other impact fees, we're including public education impact fees, which are for schools, etc. So I have alerted the school district superintendent to the fact that this matter is under consideration. As a formal matter, we have an interlocal agreement with the school district and with the other municipalities so that if the board votes to move forward today, we have to give them 30 days notice before actually considering final adoption of an ordinance. But nevertheless, I have given them preliminary indication that the issue is being discussed. Thirdly, back on May 21, Commissioner O'Brien did ask whether or not we could create an ordinance that actually had a retroactive effective date back to May 21, 2013, the date of the discussion. We've looked at that. There's nothing directly on point, but we have concluded that if that's the will of the board, our general home rule powers do allow us to do that. So if that's the desire of the board, we can do that. I've mentioned in my memo that county administrative staff does have considerable concerns about the notion of suspending impact fees. I've outlined them briefly as they've been explained to me, and I'll leave it to the administrative staff to carry those arguments today. The only other thing I wanted to mention is, I don't know if any of you caught it. I caught it this morning, so I was rereading the ordinance, but when I counted out 18 months from July in the ordinance, I should have said December 2015 would be 18 months, and that's instead I said February, which is actually 20 months out. So we would have to adjust the dates again in a final ordinance if we move forward. So at this point, as instructed, we have prepared that ordinance for initial consideration. It's before you today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Chairman, before you go, I need to declare a conflict on this item that I reviewed and spoke with the county attorney on, that due to a ongoing litigation that I'm part of that has a relationship to a ownership interest which has an interest in impact fees. After reviewing the information with the county attorney, he agreed that I should not participate in the vote, but I am allowed to participate in the discussion. Is that?
That is correct.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner Davis.
Well, just a point of order, I guess, here. I mean, this was a 3-2 vote last time. We could spend 4 hours debating this back and forth.
That's correct.
And a 2-2 fails.
That's correct.
And
both well-founded thoughts.
So, I mean, believe me, I want everybody to speak that wants to speak. Now, with that said, I don't know how much time we really want to waste on this if we don't have 2 commissioners that have changed their mind either way.
Well, and Commissioner Davis should bring up a very valid point, knowing that Commissioner Zork has to recuse himself. I believe the discussion and argument for both sides of this issue were rather strong. I don't think there was any people, commissioners, that were thinking in either way, and maybe this might be a good thing or it might be a bad thing. I think they were very firm. And
Mr. Chairman, in that case, I'd be happy to read a short statement and make a motion.
Well, again,
I would take the second half of that.
Oh no! Come on now. I've held back in two different items today. I want to. Yeah.
And there are many people here today that took time to speak, and most certainly, I always seek the opportunity to hear from everyone in the community, and but I don't know how your statement is going to take
We'll let them
place.
speak, and then I'll...
We have established, though, Counselor, that Commissioner Zork must recuse himself and will fill out the appropriate paperwork. He was the person who recommended this on motion, and again, that alters quite a bit here. Game changer.
And I do want to note on that point, sometimes the conflict of interest statutes are tough to see coming. And to Commissioner Zork's credit, he was aware of certain business dealings that he had kind of deep down in the weeds a little bit, and he came to me and asked that question. And as we discussed it, it did appear that there might be an impact, so he at that point is certainly doing the right thing.
Well, coupled with that and the other concerns about spending several hours on this, I do have another concern. There appears to be, or going to be, a rather large task for the municipalities to sort this through, and it's going to be a process, since we're waiting for next week's decision on moving forward with a consultant. If we're going to have a consultant and then we move forward, if we were to move forward with this, it would be an accounting nightmare to move back and then forward again if we were to do that. And there has not been significant empirical or quantitative data to be able to support this in either direction. There's been a lot of opinions. There's been at least, I'd say, out of 30 or 40 discussed, there was about 50 or 60 opinions. It's just that simple. There are a lot of concerns and a lot of investment in this community, a lot of future investment in this community, a lot of past investment in this community, and taking that all in consideration, there's a lot to be vetted out before we go forward with this decision. Commissioner Solari, would you? I know you wanted to.
Do you want to hear from the public first?
We'd like to hear from the public first.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. The word impact fee came up, and my name is Charles Wilson. My office is at 2001 9th Avenue in Vero Beach. I really just have I have a question for the county attorney. I understand the situation, and this is my question is the action requested today is to go to a public hearing. Is that right?
Yes. What we always do under these ordinances is the board first asks us to move forward in the process. Mm-hmm. So we create an ordinance for them to look at on an initial review. This is kind of an informal review. It's not, we couldn't adopt it today. If the board likes it on this initial review, then we go forward with the formal public hearing and adoption.
Well, my question is on the motion to recuse, or Tim's recusal of himself, that the action asked for today is whether it should go to public hearing and have a discussion. That action of having a discussion changes nothing and does not affect Mr. Zork's suit or his situation at all. All it means is that it goes to a public hearing. And so his recusal, if he has to do a recusal, his recusal would be at the public hearing. But the change to have a public hearing has absolutely nothing and will not change, will not accrue to Mr. Zork's benefit one way or the other. So I'm questioning whether this decision to have Mr. Zork recuse himself, which I understand was brought forward by a developer that has vested interest, that this is a particular way to prevent a conversation from happening. That what we're really actually doing is we're assuming the vote is taking place, and we're assuming that Mr. Solari will not come to his senses and change his vote. And
good assumption, Mr. Wilson.
That's right. I mean, what do we know?
Why would he start that now?
Right. I mean, what do we know? Peter O'Brien could bump his head and forget that he likes impact fees. We don't know. We could have a new administrator that doesn't want to spend money, through impact fees. So the question is that one of the things that this led to is the discussion at a public hearing that some information that has not been considered by Commissioner Solari, and I'm sure he's open to consider any new information that comes along that is proven to him, but the assumption that Mr. Zork has to recuse himself at this point, I'm not sure is a correct assumption, and I'd like to have your opinion on that, because this does not change Mr. Zork at all. All this does is it leads to a discussion where the information that I've been able to gather, for instance, the question of who pays impact fees, I believe that I can now demonstrate to you who does pay impact fees. And it is paid through unemployment, and it is paid through devaluation of current landowners. And I think that this going to this public hearing will be able to show you that we actually cost ourselves money with impact fees because it devalues the land and we're unable to collect taxes, or we collect taxes on the devalued land. As you know now, what's happened is impact fees are bought and sold and traded by developers as if they were a commodity. Because in many cases, the impact fees paid on land is worth more than the land. So it has now become in some developers' best interest to make sure that impact fees remain. So these kinds of discussions and proof that where we might discuss whether impact fees are in fact in the best interest of the county would be done at a public hearing. And so my question is, I don't believe that it is accurate to say that Mr. Zork has to recuse himself today. We also are forward-looking into when the public hearing is done, because for all we know, Mr. Zork's suit could be finished by that time, and there would be no conflict at the time when Mr. Zork is forced to vote. But right now, his vote is on whether to discuss an impact fee. And there is absolutely nothing in the conflict of interest rules that I'm aware of that prevents him from discussing impact fees and gathering information. And that's what we're here for. So I object to Mr. Zork's being led to believe that he has to recuse himself at this juncture. He may have to recuse himself later, but not today.
Now, let me just respond to that. I was waiting for, I get the point early, I was waiting for you to stop talking.
Well, yeah, good luck. I've been here a little longer.
Keep in mind, the voting rules are part of the Code of Ethics. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to the Code of Ethics in Florida, they're somewhat like the Sunshine Law. They're considered somewhat sacred, and as a result of that, they're interpreted very liberally to accomplish the purpose that they're intended to accomplish. Yeah. So, for example, when you take things like the Sunshine Law says that they have to meet and take action at a public meeting. But the courts have interpreted that Sunshine Law to extend to the entire decision-making process because they feel that's necessary to preserve the integrity of the purpose of the Sunshine Law. You come over to the Code of Ethics, and I think it's the same thing. There is no distinction in the Code of Ethics and under the voting statutes that distinguishes between voting on preliminary matters that could lead to the conclusion versus voting on the conclusion itself. There is no distinction like that in the statute. That being the case, and given the purpose of the Code of Ethics, it's certainly my interpretation that anything in that decision-making process which could lead to something, which in this case would Mr. Zork believes, or Commissioner Zork believes, would impact his financial interest in a company that he has. My view is that probably is covered. He feels that it could influence his vote. That being the case, pretty much the question is over as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I appreciate the lesson that Mr. Paladin and others have taught me because I'll remember to be able to use that one of these days when I need to break a tie vote. So I appreciate your explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'm going to speak briefly. Mr. Wilson, Joseph Paladin, President of Black Swan Consulting, and I also am a developer here in the county in Avoca. And I did speak in opposition 2 weeks ago against the moratorium on impact fees, not for any benefit to myself, but a benefit to the county. There's no way of new development paying for itself without paying impact fees. That's been proven over the years and discussed over the years, several years. Mr. Wilson indicated that a developer might have persuaded Mr. Zork to recuse himself and looked in my direction. I can tell you I've never had a conversation with Mr. Zork about impact fees. So that indication isn't true. I think that going forward with the moratorium on impact fees should stand on its own merit. Like I said before, somewhere down the line, we have to pay our own way. We have to be responsible. And we have 3 different points here in the county. We have services, taxes, impact fees. Nobody wants to reduce services. Nobody wants to pay higher taxes. You can't eliminate impact fees without doing one or the other two. We need to pay our fair share. We need to go forward. Me as a developer talking about benefiting and not paying impact fees, you think, well, that's a real bargain. That's great. Why wouldn't I not want to pay impact fees? Well, if you don't have infrastructure and you don't meet concurrency, you can't build a project and you can't get it out of the ground. Without impact fees, there's no way of meeting that concurrency. There's no way of having that infrastructure ready for you unless you raise the taxes, use ad valorem taxes, and have people that aren't going to make money off the project pay more than their fair share. We're going to make money off the project. We should pay our fair share. That's the way it should be. That's the way it's always been, and that's the way it should continue to be. So I think we can stand our own merit of not having this moratorium, not just Mr. Sork recusing himself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paladin.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to say, though, that after this part is done, it does not mean that I don't have a host of ideas of how to reduce impact fees that would not be in a conflict, and I'd like to bring up that discussion after we get through this point as an alternative.
If we do.
Yes, sir.
That's a good idea. Commissioner Davis, did you have something?
I'll let the public speak first.
Morning. Nicholas Giesler. I'm an attorney with Giesler & Giesler, PA. We specialize in constitutional issues arising out of regulation of private property.
Morning,
and I would like to concur with the last speaker. I think there could potentially be a concurrency issue if these impact fees are suspended at the moment and then brought back. And my concern legally is that if there is an issue with concurrency and then the impact fees are reinstated and then perhaps needed to be strengthened, that you would then run into a constitutional issue with the constitutionality of the new impact fees and its relation to the dual rational nexus test, which I know the county attorney has addressed somewhat in the memo that he sent to you guys that I read before this meeting. So I would just like to make that point, and thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
One of these days I'm going to take that test.
Which test?
The dual rational nexus.
I thought it was the law test. You can be a lawyer.
Good morning, everyone. Scott Sanders, Director of Facilities, School District of Indian River County. I just want to be clear before I start here that I'm not speaking on behalf of the school board. They have not had a chance to put together their position as a corporate body. But what I did want to do is share some factual information with you on how impact fees have helped us as a district over the years. I have a spreadsheet here that I'm willing to pass out. I brought several copies. Basically, since October 14, 2005 through July 19, 2006, the district collected about $5.4 million in impact fees. That's about the time we saw the economic downturn, so the numbers reduced, but they were still significant because from fiscal year 2007 through fiscal year 2013, as of May, was the last reporting, we've collected an additional $3.8 million. Just to help you understand what that was spent for, we've got two projects that we primarily spent all of those monies on. The Sebastian River High School Freshman Learning Center, we allocated about $3.9 million. And then the Felsmer Elementary School, which, as you all know, is a community that has a lot of needs, and we have a growing population there. We've allocated about $6.4 million. In addition to the actual collection of impact fees, we have experienced about $1 million, a little less than $1 million worth of interest that we've collected on the impact fees. And again, that's all broken down in the spreadsheet that I'll be glad to pass out before I leave. But just to reinforce, this is not the position of the board. This is merely factual numbers that we're able to provide you. And the board did receive the notice that this was going to be an issue. That's why I'm here today. So they will be discussing this, and they will establish a position one way or the other and take part in this process.
Commissioner Davis.
Yes. Just real quick, Mr. You say your name's Scott Sanders? Are you the one with that sand mine?
I have nothing to do with 82nd Avenue.
I was helping you out with that just in case that you started to get vilified.
Thank you.
Make sure Henry got that.
Yeah,
I think I'll open with that from now on.
And you're not your boss is not Fran Adams, the former county commissioner either, right?
Right.
So, okay. My question is specifically, as it relates to the impact fees for schools, commercial properties don't pay them because, in theory, they don't put children in schools because of a commercial property. It's just residential side. But with that, how there is a certain level of service as far as so many student stations, I'm assuming this is the formula, so many student stations per resident or per household. I'm assuming that's the benchmark that's established. How can you spend impact fee dollars on expanding an elementary school whenever you've raised an elementary school and have, in effect, are taking capacity off the system but using impact fees to increase the capacity and concurrency?
It has a lot to do with the zoning. I'm sure you're talking about the Osceola Magnet School that we raised.
Yes.
And that wasn't something that we wanted to do. That was something we were forced to do.
Sure.
We had some serious flooding issues. We had problems with the facility as a whole. So we didn't want to do that.
Right.
But that wasn't in the same zone as Fellsmere.
Okay.
Fellsmere is kind of a standalone. It's evaluated.
Have they changed the ordinances? Because I was on the school board whenever we purchased the land for Treasure Coast Elementary. Of course, at the time, it was whenever we first did it, it was for Liberty Magnet. That's where the original Liberty Magnet was. And we had empty student stations down in Highlands. But because of our fish report, we could not allocate any, if I'm not mistaken, it was at the time PICO dollars for any student stations, any additional student stations out of that categorical funding for Treasure Coast Elementary or the new Liberty Magnet. We literally had to basically just out of our available funds build that school because we had empty student stations somewhere else. Now, as far as impact fees, I would assume that would confuse us a whole lot more on the educational side. If you're spending impact fees to increase, is it broken down in 3 different zones like our traffic impact fees are? Zone 1, Zone 2, and Zone 3? Or I don't see how you're able to spend impact fees on schools at all when you're taking student stations off the system by leveling a school and then continuing to collect impact fees to increase student capacity.
I wasn't prepared to speak on that.
And I didn't know you were going to be here, but this is just one of those things that...
Neither was he.
Right. I found out last night. Speaking specifically to Fellsmere, as far as having student stations available, we have capacity at other schools, you're correct. Fellsmere has and I don't have the term in front of me, but the DOE has established a designation for isolated environments like Fellsmere.
Okay.
They're their own community outside of the rest of the district. They're kind of a standalone.
Right.
And that's one of the ways that we were able to do that. We've shown a need in that community. Again, we're at 750 capacity. We have 750 students enrolled.
Right.
So it's all by itself. We'd have a hardship trying to get those students that need those stations that are available to other schools, transporting them in. As you know, that's a demographically unique area in the county. So Fellsmere, again, has a special designation. Again, there is a term for it that the DOE has granted us.
All right, maybe that's right, because that trend just continued. I mean, because we had our largest elementary schools were Pelican Island, Sebastian, and Fellsmere, and then we needed another North County school. So that I understand what you're saying, but I wasn't aware of this special DOE designation that would allow for that.
I can get you some more information on that.
Okay, I'll get with you.
Okay. And actually, on that same topic, does that mean that charter schools, which are public schools, do they share in the impact fee revenue stream back to charters, or does the district keep all that?
The district does have some money that goes to charters.
Through impact fees or through PICO?
I don't know. Okay. You'd have to ask finance.
Well, I'd like to have a whole explanation on that, because not that this is a school board meeting, but there's a lot of construction money. There's a lot of money movement issues, budget-wise, construction-wise, that I'd have questions for.
And as far as the school district, the school board is concerned, like I say, we're going to participate in this whole process. Today wasn't a debate. It wasn't an establishment of our position. It was just a matter of sharing facts as how we've used impact fees over the years.
Super.
Thank you for taking the time to do this.
That's why we prefer talking about sand mines.
Sand mines, yeah. But next time let's talk about sand mines. How's that?
And the route you took to get here, yes, most certainly. The clerk,
Mr. Chairman.
We appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes, that is a very good example of why I'm suggesting that this go forward, is because the information just presented to you shows that those impact fees, Mr. Davis, you are absolutely correct. The impact fees for roads are separated into districts. The impact fees for schools are not separated into districts. And what we just heard is testimony that those impact fees have been spent incorrectly. And one of the things that I wanted to show you when we came before this discussion was there is a county, and I believe it's Lee County, that was required to pay $1.5 million back out of its general fund for impact fees that were spent out of district, which is something to consider for this board, is that there is a liability that is carried with impact fees, and they had to repay that money for doing exactly what Indian River County has done in the past. Now, it doesn't do me any good to try to get that money, because all you're doing is costing our community. It doesn't go back to people. It's just a fine, if you will. So I haven't brought it up before. But if at some point we need to have a discussion about the pitfalls of impact fees, which include the potential of having to repay this out of the general fund, and that's just a good example. Because as the student stations go down, the level of need, they have what's called comps that they've been able to build schools with in cases like Fellsmere. But you cannot use impact fee money except to increase capacity. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner Solari.
I'd like to talk to, note two things. As far as I understood Mr. Wilson, he noted two reasons why we ought to have the public hearing. One, the repayment of misused impact fees, and the second, the idea that the removal of impact fees will increase the value of property on the tax rolls. I believe that both of those are basically incorrect. They might have been correct had the issue for the public hearing been the permanent removal of impact fees. But given that they're just a temporary removal, a moratorium for 2 years, those issues fall away. So with that, and I don't believe anybody else wants to speak, I would go ahead and note that impact fees were devised to pay for the impact of the county on development, and that they were not designed to either increase or decrease the rate of growth, and they should not be used for such a purpose. Presently, impact fees are at a reasonable level. There is no good reason to change them today. I will note that we have already asked staff to review our impact fee structure with an eye towards keeping residential impact fees at the level they are today and reducing commercial impact fees to a lower level if legally defensible. Importantly, I will note that politicians such as the five of us on the dais today have a lousy record when we move from the political arena to the economic arena. This has been the case from Thomas Jefferson's Non-Importation Act of 1806 through Smoot-Hawley and through the recent clash for clunkers. In short, history very clearly shows that the record of politicians when they try to improve the economy is generally awful, and that the more politicians mess with the economy, the worse things get for our citizens. As the Secretary of the Treasurer Albert Gallatin warned then-President Jefferson prior to the passage of the Non-Importation Act, and I quote, "Governmental prohibitions do always more mischief than had been calculated, and it is not without much hesitation that a statesman should hazard to regulate the concerns of individuals as if he could do better than they themselves." Jefferson's Non-Importation Act was an economic disaster for Americans. So it was in 1806, so it will be today for the citizens of Indian River County if we vote to use impact fees as a tool to spur our economy. So given that, and given what we've heard today, I move that we do not go ahead with the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman.
Most of the discussion was when we did not have impact fees, correct?
No, there was the buggy whip impact fee that Jefferson proposed, but it was voted down.
A buggy whip?
It was
Just kidding.
Oh. No, I thought, well, if...
You had to go back to that time, what could you assess a fee on back then? So, there was horse and buggy, so you had to have the buggy whip fee.
But there were very little needs at that time as well.
True. Yeah.
Well, community concerns. They were just worried about staying here.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I'd like to just comment.
I know, but...
One short comment on Mr. Solari's statement. He was exactly correct, and I support everything he said 100%. But you don't have to look back that far for this to come into play. You can go to the Fair Trade Act of 2010. It was passed in September, but it was based on the Smoot-Hawley Act of 1931, and it tends to the same conversation that Mr. Solari brought forward. So I just want to support him.
Y'all had breakfast together this morning, didn't you?
I was concerned. Commissioner Solari has brought up Smoot-Hawley Act in the past, which again was blamed for the Great Depression and was an element of socialism at its worst or best. But I really do not see the correlation. I didn't see it then. I don't see it now. I did not want to excite the fact that Smoot-Hawley would be brought up because I figured it would anticipate or ignite another half-hour dissertation on Smoot-Hawley. and I believe that something that happened in the 30s should be left there.
2010 is fairly recent.
The simple lesson is
They've
that
all
when...
been-
The
I'll
simple
second
lesson,
that.
Mr. Chairman, since you missed it...
That would be that motion
is that
that we're-
when...
Which motion?
The one he made.
You make...
Yes, I made the motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just,
But the simple lesson from it is that when politicians such as ourselves try to manage the economy, we generally miss out, and it's the citizens who suffer, and that is something we ought to try to avoid, I believe, as representatives of our systems.
I agree with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I agree with that. They're well-founded, some of the...
Mr. Chairman, I think I need to say that before I came on this board, I always assumed Smoot Hawley was Judge Hawley's pet name for his wife. I learned something by just sitting here.
I thought Smoot was a pet. I don't, no, actually, I studied that my collegiate years as well, and it was a very impactful time in our history, and I appreciate that. But they're still open for debate, even though it happened in the 30s, whether that caused or cured the Depression in any way, shape, or form. And it'll probably be open for debate for another 100 years. There are many opinions on Smoot Hawley. I didn't get a rebuttal, so I guess
Well,
there are opinions.
You just previously stated that you didn't want today to be a debate on Smoot Hawley, so I wasn't going to be.
Oh,
so
thank
I'll
you.
just once again say that when politicians such as ourselves try to manage the economy, whether it be in Soviet Russia or Indian River County, we generally do so at the detriment to our citizens, and that's the mistake I would hope we not make today.
Thank you.
Mr.
Chairman, there is a motion on the floor.
Yeah, just for clarification, Commissioner Slurry's motion was
I'm going to
not proceed with the public hearing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And Commissioner Davis, you second that?
I did. That doesn't mean I'm voting for it. I'm just trying to get to the end of this thing.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion?
Yes. Just real, I mean,
Commissioner Davis.
we were going nowhere fast with this, and I do have respect.
Well, we may go somewhere shortly.
Okay, and that'll be fine, but I mean, as far as going down the path of the advertising, I think it would be a colossal waste of taxpayer dollars at this point in light of a 2-2 tie that, according to Robert's Rules of Order, would fail. So
I agree.
let's move on.
Go ahead and call the question, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Solari, seconded by Commissioner Davis, not to advertise for a public hearing for an 18-month moratorium. And we have Commissioner Zorc having to abstain. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-1
Mr. Chairman.
with Commissioner Zorc abstaining.
With that out of the way, we have a couple of things and moves related to impact fees. We have Tyndall Oliver's new consultant agreement basically ready to go. We have our new county attorney from Jacksonville, where Jacksonville Duval has been a very active alternative fee structure methodology using mobility plans, other ways of calculating who needs to pay what. What I'd like to propose, and I spoke with, after speaking with our county attorney yesterday, I said, am I crossing any lines if I reach out to the new county attorney and ask him some of how did it work in Jacksonville, how did this work, how did that work. There's some potential ideas, I think, before we send the Tyndall Oliver contract out, is I'm proposing on July 10th to have a afternoon impact fee workshop that provides, the new attorney starts on July 1st. July 10th means we're not holding up Tyndall Oliver for any extended period of time, to make sure we're including everything in Tyndall Oliver's scope of work to include. And I've heard that Tyndall Oliver's has shared a lot of new concepts or new ideas that are out there in how we calculate methodology and meet our rational nexus test to the community development director is to look at proposing holding this meeting on July 10th and kind of flushing out the discussion of impact fees in a little bit more detail and see what else is out there. We want to be pro-job creation. We don't want to stop our revenue streams for roads, which with the small amount that's coming in, we run out of money for roads anyway, even if you keep the fees. So we don't really have a long-term funding solution for
Are you
roads.
after a motion for that, or are you just wanting to?
Well, I'd like to see if you're in favor of holding this workshop event on July 10th to look at impact fees. After that, Tyndall Oliver can be released with his potentially tweaked or modified set of objectives in their consultant's report as they're looking at the impact fees.
Mr. Chairman,
No.
that's it.
Please go.
That's an interesting, because I had this conversation with Mr. Plakowicz, and I mean, what we're doing right now is the RFQ is under evaluation for the impact fee analysis, of which we're required to do every 3 years. It costs us about $150,000, and then of which we can shoot down. Nobody says we got to approve it. That's what happened to the last one. But it's in our ordinances to do it. So with that, I was talking to Alan, and the math as far as the impact fees and how they come up with it, to me, doesn't work. And I'll start with, I believe that parks or green space or open space is based on a per capita ratio. So if you increase the population, then you need to increase the amount of parks and recreation green space. Well, the only way to, if you follow that all the way through with that being a proportion, the only way you follow it all the way through is eventually we're going to have to increase the size of our county to make that level of service remain the same. So to me, that's monkey science on that one to begin with.
Yep.
Then you take the next one, and to me, and I can't for the life of me see how, now that there's a Publix on the corner of 53rd and US 1, when I leave here, it's close now for me to stop at Publix on my way home. But yet,
write them a check.
Exactly. So that the whole concept behind this is one where I almost want to change our scope of services and say, you know, whoever agrees with this line of thought, give us your price. Instead of the way we're doing it right now with Tyndall Oliver, Duncan, whomever's going to be the one we do with the RFQ. But I'm good with it. I've argued this till I'm blue in the face, and if somebody else can help me understand it better, I'm all for it. You need a motion on that workshop?
Actually, I think that Mr. Zork probably should put this under his matters for next week.
Yes.
Because
I'll
this
do that.
wasn't on the agenda, and it wasn't added as an
And we'll
emergency.
start voting on another topic that was not publicly announced.
Commissioner Zork, that day is not a really good day for me. I've got a lot of other meetings. Maybe
there is,
Thursday, the 11th is pretty open.
Okay. Yeah, and I just looked at it as, and the 11th is wide open too, so we'll change that to the 11th.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Preference, anybody morning or afternoon?
Well, I think
morning. Okay.
Morning, but let's go ahead and get that on the agenda for next week and propose it, and I trust by that time everybody will be
I think it's good we have a little talk now, so
look at all the
Commissioner Zork knows
calendars
what
for
dates are
July
available.
11th, you thinking?
Yes, that's, at least, sounds like for Peter, it's okay. For me, that day right now at the moment is open.
You have advanced technology
I
right
do.
here. I don't.
I do.
So
And one other thing I'd like to put in Tyndall Oliver's scope, if it's not in there, if the school district isn't divided into boundaries, as Commissioner Davis said, that you can have people paying school money in South County, and it's not used in South County, it's used somewhere else or somewhere out of their benefit district, that I want to get that ironed down, so if they collect it in an area, they need to improve the schools in that area, not...
Can't be for improvement.
Well, no, it's got to be for capacity. No, you're right. But to make sure that we're representing that properly. But I'll include some of these things in the backup next week.
Well, for current growth, not for future growth or past growth.
Yes.
Okay. It sounds like we have a new agenda developing. And with that, Commissioner Davis, we'll move on to commission items. You have an item?
Mine's just housekeeping, Commissioner. I've got a District 1 appointee there, and they live in District 1, but they're currently the at-large, and I'd like just with your consideration to make that the District 1 appointee versus the at-large. So moved.
Second.
And then just by notice, we're looking for an at-large member at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, you have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Davis, seconded by myself. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. That was quick. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. All my items are.
Next item on the agenda is Commissioner Zork has an item. Staffing levels in the Commission Office, memorandum dated May 30, 2013, found on pages 113.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to kind of be in the office for roughly 6 months to kind of see how things work, how things flowed.
We're glad you did.
Thank you, sir. One thing that I've noticed is that Peter and I share one person, but I do work with the other ladies upstairs, is that the level of, when you take their normal day and then you take out vacation time, sick time, meeting coverage time, transcribing time, receptionist sitting at the front time,
Absenteeism. Don't forget absenteeism.
Sick time and
or sick time or
Joe, it's been covered.
vacation.
Issue up there.
Thank you.
Okay.
That I'm constantly giving Terry a lot of stuff to do, and Misty, and then sometimes Laura, but I know with the chairman's position, that stays pretty busy just keeping up with the chairman's stuff.
Actually, Terry is still handling all the chairman's paperwork from the agendas.
Oh, no, as far as the committees.
Right, but
Yes.
every week there's a stack of the contracts and everything on the consent
And
agenda, all that.
she handles that over.
And Terry is still handling that. Yeah.
Right.
That comes in from the clerk.
Right. So there's a lot of workload that I'm a tasker. I usually call Terry in the morning and I'll send her morning list. Okay, call this person, set up this, do this, and she does a great job keeping up as best as she can. But I'm almost at some points now purposely not giving her things to do because I don't want her to have to stay late, come in early, and overload her more than what she is. I see, in kind of observing how the office works, the transcribing takes a lot of times. And I know when I come up to her and I have a question and she's listening and I interrupt her train of thought to ask her a question and then she's got to go back and rewind the tape, start back over again. So I don't know if it's a combination of, do we look at contracting out the transcribing services on a contractual arrangement to somebody that just does that all the time. I know they're abbreviated minutes, but you still have to listen to the tape. So if you're listening to an hour meeting, my guess is it probably takes you 2 hours or longer to listen to the
Probably
tape
longer.
to create the minutes out of it, or even longer depending on how heated the discussion is. The front desk is covered fairly well, but it's empty a lot of the times, and when people come up, I know it has ring bell for service. That's
Very personal.
That's not the best. I would say
The citizens embrace that feeling, yes.
yeah. So I'm trying to see is how do I have a lot more stuff for them to do. Maybe it's because I'm the new guy and Gary, Commissioner Wheeler, had been here for a long time, and some of you guys are more I don't want to say seasoned, but I'm not worn out of ideas yet. I got a lot more stuff to get out there, and I see as the workload on her side.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Is I have a lot more things I'd like to accomplish.
You know, you might have come in the room with a lot more support than you.
All those in favor of moving him across the hall?
You thought you heard crickets this morning. No. Actually, you're absolutely right, Commissioner Zorko. There is a whole lot more that you're moving forward with, and I can't disagree with anything you're saying.
Well, I just want to take another side of that.
I don't think he's finished, though.
You
go
interrupted
ahead.
him, so I thought he was. No, I'll wait.
Go ahead.
No, after you're done.
So I'm trying to see a way to free up the, and I don't know, I don't want to use the word manage their time, because they manage with what they have, but it's stretched, where, not that I don't mind leaving her voice messages, say when you get a chance, check on this, when you get a chance, check on that, and I'm saying that they're doing a good job, and Terry has more than once called me at 5:30 or 6 when she's still at the office working on stuff, finishing it up that I'd left her earlier in the day to do. I don't think that's, I don't mind doing things early and late, but it's not my job to impose that on them. And the other tasks that they have to do, the covering the meetings, the transcribing, the sitting at the front. You know, at the front, if somebody wants to book an appointment, the computer system in the front does not allow them to pull up the calendar to schedule anything for any of us, whoever's at the front. And that's maybe just an IT issue. I don't know how that part works, but so I'm trying to see how to create a more sustainable working environment with the support staff that we have, whether it's a receptionist and contracting out the transcribing, and then the persons that are there are not distracted doing these other tasks. They can focus on the needs and requests that I have for them to work on a daily basis. But I'm open to anybody else's ideas or thoughts.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, well, Commissioner Solari wanted to speak.
It's actually my belief that the citizens of Indian River County elected us and pay us over $70,000 a year for us to do the work.
How much?
Over $70,000. That's including the benefits, Mr. Chairman. I added those in because that's what the citizens pay us.
Not all of us take those benefets.
Okay.
There'll be different levels.
That's fine.
I think the base salary is $53,000.
Yes, but most of us get medical, we get car allowance, we get Social Security that the citizens pay for. There are lots of different things. So the cost is basically about $70,000. Thank you. And they do that, they pay this for us to do the work and not to delegate it to assistants. I'm going to note that when I got here 4 years ago, the average agenda was about 600, 700 pages. Today's agenda is about 122 pages. And most of the agendas for months have been not much more than 200 pages. So my suggestion is if instead of hiring somebody else or doing something, paying more money for people to do the work that the commissioners ought to do, that the commissioners just come to the office earlier in the day or actually show up 4 or 5 times a week. I don't believe that we're overworked at all, and I believe that, again, that the citizens elected us to do the work and not simply delegate it. So I think that one of the greatest things we did in the commissioner offices is reduce the bloated bureaucracy that we had 5 years ago when revenues were great. And I would hate to see us move in the direction of returning to a bloated bureaucracy. So I'm certainly going to be, I'm helpful to do anything that would increase the efficiency of the office, but I'm certainly not in favor of anything that would increase the tax dollars that the citizens pay for more work to be done in our office.
And let me just be clear. I don't task Terry to attend any meeting, go to meet any constituent, go to any place of business, go to any ribbon cutting, go to any school event, go to anything else. I ask her to arrange those for me to attend them in an orderly fashion.
And that's
now,
fine.
it's some I do on my own, but some I say work out with them between their schedule and my schedule, what's the best time to attend something. So if that's, to me, that's, how often do I answer my phone? Very rarely, because it's a better time management to let somebody else inventory it, take the question, deal with it, respond to it with an answer. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Davis.
No, I see things. I see exactly what Commissioner Solari is talking about because I've been there through that entire process. But I think really, Commissioners, and I have some compassion for somebody that's been on this job for 6 months. I really do. It took me a solid 2 years to be able to pull yourself up to speed, to learn where the departments are. If you had a situation, to learn the management styles of Mr. Polakowicz. Actually, it was Mr. Collins at the time, and then Mr. Baird. We've got a new attorney coming in, and quite frankly, it may be a situation where he wants any legal questions to come through him, which by rule is the way it should be. But they've both had a very relaxed style that allowed us to go directly to staff, ask questions, and get answers. Now, with that said, I think some of the things that are happening in the office, I think, are very antiquated. And by that I mean, and I don't know legally how we could do it, but just take minutes, for example, that you're talking about the transcribing. I don't know how much more accurate you can get of what happened at a meeting than watching a DVD of it. I don't know why we couldn't approve the DVD of the meeting if we have to versus the minutes. But to me, but to have somebody sit there and in there and type it out as not verbatim necessarily, but if they really want to jump to the motion to find out how the motion went, there's a way of tagging that on there to where you can just click to look at that. So, and we've had some discussion about some voice recognition software. The clerk has. I know there's expense in that, but I really believe that if there's something that we could tackle right now, it would be the transcribing part of it. Now, whether it's to bring somebody in or whether it's to change the methodology of how we do it, I don't know. I'm open to that. Now, Commissioner Zork, I will tell you this. You got elected by the people of Indian River County just like I did. And if there is something that you think that you need to do your job more effective, that's a soft spot with me. I will certainly be there to support you in it. Tell me what you need. Now, with that said, I told this to Commissioner Flesher also. And when it came to decision time on the aides, and you're going to have to defend that. Not me, but I cannot defend me holding you back with what whatever you think you need to do an effective job as a commissioner, because really the only thing you can kind of count on is 4 years.
Right.
And I say kind of because that's not even guaranteed.
I agree with Commissioner Davis on that, and all of us here have had to make the decision whether we had the opportunity to have somebody assist us, whether we had the shared responsibility. There's been a long nexus on how we got here today, and I know that you're aware of most of it, but the painful truth of coming in from 5 commissioner assistants and an executive aide and a receptionist to where we are today. There's been much discussion, and whether it went from the employee rights issue to at-will employees to doing all the minutes, or then having some of the minutes assigned back to, like the MPO minutes, that's been a reduction. There's been some great effort in removing some of the committees, some to agree and not to agree with, but the fact that the workload has changed significantly. But nonetheless, you can't take away from the system demands by having someone there, and you said to operate more efficiently, not taking those calls. Most certainly. You're out in the field. I'm out in the field. I should hope that all of us are out in the field and working with businesses and working with constituent needs, looking at them, evaluating them, telling people exactly what we are doing, and being committed to what we say we're going to do at a campaign, and being out there helping people. When we're doing that, we come back to staff and identifying these needs and concerns, and then bringing them back to a resolution. Well, the phones are being answered. Well, the minutes are being taken. Well, some of the ministerial constituent needs are being addressed. We all get calls upstairs that, quite frankly, people shake their heads and say, "You got a call for that?" Yes, most certainly we did. And we told the citizens that we are going to work for them, and we do. And sometimes those calls come in, and maybe it's a utility bill situation, or maybe it's something that somebody hasn't gotten back to them yet. Well, the staff is there to take care of it. But as I think Joe Baird has pointed out about, oh, by the way, don't forget about attendance. Yes, attendance is a concern, and when you have now a weakened staff of from 5 and 1 down to 3, and one is out at a meeting and one is out sick, you have one individual in that office. One individual in that office, and it happened twice in the past 2 weeks, that there was one individual in that office. And with that, if a commissioner has something, now we have another problem. We're coming into a situation where the Sunshine Law might be called to task here, where somebody forgets who they're working for and what they're working on, and all it takes is a slip of information before one of us are called to task as to was that intentional and non-intentional, and we're placing an employee in a terrible situation and a responsibility that they did not get elected for. They just were selected for, and they had a position. We all have the right to do have that selection process, and agreed with Commissioner Davis that you have the right, most certainly, for that selection process. I believe your predecessor had the option to do that and said, well, I'm retiring, so what we'll do is, I think the motion was to have another individual take minutes, and the agreement was that that individual would also be employed up to and including a certain amount of hours. And I don't know how that has worked out, but that was one of the stopgaps in a reduction as well. Right. So there's a whole lot to look at here, and Commissioner, I'll pass this out. Just I didn't know where you were going with this today, but let me just pass this out to all of the commissioners, as well as Joe, the attorney. Everybody have one? And I think I have one here. It just is a matter of, and I'll ensure that the clerk has one as well. I did have the opportunity to just do a brief survey. And again, this is not I don't know exactly where you're going, and it's not supporting or taking away from anything that you wish to do. I just wanted to point out that Brevard, Duval, Martin, Okeechobee, Orange, St. Lucie, Seminole, and Palm Beach counties all have commissioner assistants for each commissioner. By and large, most of them report directly to the commissioner. And again, I believe HR did some kind of a survey when we were making those decisions. In one of the pads, I know this has come up a few times, there is a little exception. I believe Okeechobee County, with a population of 37,765, they're assisted by the county administrator's assistant. But they do not have quite the needs that the commissioners here have, where you have the same amount of commissioners, but you have 139,000 citizens to address their needs with, as opposed to 37,000. Their salaries are far less as well. But if you look at it, by and large, most of them have the assistant reporting directly to the commissioner, which absolves a lot of challenges that you may be discussing or touching.
Mm-hmm. So as for the direction to go, I'm not necessarily advocating a assistant per commissioner. I think to me, the two things are the rotation of vacation cycle meeting coverage, the normal day in and day out, creates a lot of vacancies at the front, and also stretches those that are left in the back. Sometimes the one that's at the front's the only one that's even in the commission room. And the transcribing, to me, seems the biggest, bulkiest time consumer. So looking at those, and I know we have Rita that does, she's 20 hours a week or 15?
Actually, we've got Rita that does the two biggest, that's the code enforcement and the planning and zoning. These are two biggest committees. We also I have a part-time position as a receptionist that I didn't fill because I was going to fill it, and some commissioners got upset, thought we might cut it, and so we did not fill it. I have a position of 24 hours 24 hours biweekly. What we're filling is the middle of the day when there's lunch hours and things like that. Also, we can look at other, other things as far as taking the load off of the minutes. I can talk to the clerk. We can look at automation, and I can get back with you on those. Those are things
I think would improve things dramatically.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, I know. I started to move forward, and I had opposition when I advertised. I don't know why, but I did.
That's because he thought he had 3 votes. I'm talking about Bob.
No, actually, he Commissioner Sawyer was not the major opposition.
Right. Okay.
This time, no.
It was a unique experience.
Yeah. Well, I think really the easy. I mean, if I'm the only one here that feels this way, so be it. But I really feel like the system that we have as far as the minutes is archaic. And there's got to be a better way. I don't know statutorily what we have to do, Mr. Plockwich, but if you could let us know if we could approve the DVD, the audio, I mean, you name it. I just don't see the need for us to.
I don't think you can do just that. The Sunshine Law requires it to be public notice of minutes. Those are the 2 basic requirements. Now, minutes may be a flexible term as we move forward in technology.
That's my thought.
Things that can be done, but I don't think you can just approve the DVD of the meeting.
Okay, how if we approve the minutes of the meeting and it's a DVD?
Well, you might be, I don't know. I have not looked at that question.
Okay.
And I have some ideas, too. Someone brought up MPO, and that's a good thing. I can look at, pooling that, and we need to look at automation.
That's already pulled out.
They're already doing their minutes.
Right, and I don't want to, this is one thing I don't want to do, Joe, I don't want it to be a shift necessarily, unless it has to be. I mean, we're not unique in the BCC department here, as far as everybody doing more with less. and having the same situations. And so I don't want it to be, okay, we're going to solve this problem, we're going to take it out of the commission offices and put it down in community development. I don't think that that's the proper approach, especially with the increase in workloads that we're starting to see there. I'd like to see something a little bit more outside of the box thinking than just pushing.
And by the way, Commissioner, also, I have, if you each want to get assistance, that's your decision. Also, if you wanted to put it back under you, I'd be glad to hand it back, if you don't mind saying that.
Well, I don't necessarily know if that's the concern, but I don't think that, and I will say that your office is doing a good job on supervision. It's not taking away from that. But, and I did not know where Commissioner Zorc was going with this, but I don't believe that shifting the responsibility has corrected any and all of the concerns. And I believe that there are other new concerns that develop when you have supervision that's not direct supervision or within the room. I mean, there was some things that I was just tossing around in my mind, Joe, not knowing where Commissioner Zorc was going with this. We had no opportunity to speak. Yes, the Sunshine Law does work. But, you know, if you brought it back and not looking at, Commissioner Zorc identified that the chairman may have a little bit more responsibilities, and I just heard from Commissioner O'Brien that Terry has not given up that responsibility with the signing of all the documents. Yes, folks, everything that happens here gets signed off starting this afternoon and tomorrow, and there's a lot of legal documents that go through the law office as well. And when it comes through, it does get funneled through Terry. And then you're right, there might be some duplication of efforts there. Then Laura gives it to me, and then we sign it off on it, then it goes back. Somebody will look at it. It goes back to the clerk's office. We could probably clean that up too. But I believe that was because a lot of the responsibilities had to be assigned by a supervisor. And so let me just get back to the fact that perhaps maybe direct office supervision might be the most appropriate. And it could be the chairman's assistant responsibility. It's not to say that it's this chairman's assistant's responsibility, but it could be designed in that fashion where it's split up, where the chairman has a lot more roles and responsibility, and more work could be placed on that sole individual, and then the other two commissioners have someone to share. But I think that each commission should be given the right to elect to have an assistant, whether it's from a pool process or it's by individual virtual selection, because that's where all of the other commissioners have been able to cultivate their resources to operate effectively for the citizens of Indian River County. So with that in mind, I just wanted to say that I believe that there is room for change. Joe, thank you for bringing that up. I do believe that is a little bit of a concern when this matter is brought up, unless somebody wants to think more about it today.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Commissioner Solari. If our agendas have gone from 600 pages to 100, how come our meetings are going longer?
That's a question I'm not talking about. It's not because we're doing more work, though.
Well, I think we are.
That's the thing. It's not because, let me answer the question. Okay. It's certainly not because we're doing more work. It seems to be because we certainly want to fill as much time as we can before an audience. But the agendas speak for themselves. We have a lot less work to do. Back when 5 years ago we were spending north of $400 million a year, we're now spending more closer to $252 million, and most of those are just regular ongoing things. So I'm befuddled about how we could possibly need more assistance. And I will note that the chairman said we ought to be committed to what we say during the campaign.
Yes.
And when I campaigned on nothing more than limited government. And it hurts me, it pains me to see us moving back towards a big bloated bureaucracy just because, some monies are coming back. So I think we ought to all be committed to doing the right things for the citizens of Indian River County. And before we'd even consider something like unnecessary, extraneous, additional personal assistance, we ought to think about putting more lifeguards back on Tracking Station Beach. Or we ought to consider trying to take care of the deferred maintenance of our parks. Or we might even consider actually giving a raise to the rest of the county workers who haven't gotten a raise in the last 4 or 5 years. So I think before we spend an additional dollar in our BCC office, I think we ought to just roll up our own sleeves and do our own work and leave those other dollars to pay for those things which the citizens actually need. So that's just
I think that's already occurring.
Commissioner Solari for that clarification.
And if somebody will make a motion to hurt and pain Commissioner Solari, I'd just about second that for fun.
I think that's already happening, and it's a matter of quantity versus quality. And I want to go back about 6 months to almost a year when Commissioner Solari said that, we're getting a lot of complaints that our meetings are boring and they're not active and we're not exciting or entertaining. Well, it was just my part to ensure that the public's getting their value in our meetings. Thank you.
Actually, that wasn't a complaint that they were quiet and boring. Actually, I thought that was an improvement in our government.
No, they were bored.
Okay.
And taking Commissioner Solari's suggestions to heart, when the Lagoon Symposium that was put on, we did have some help with Terry, but I did recruit, including my wife, probably put in 60 hours prepping, as well as sign-in volunteers and other people working in the lobby. So I think the actual and any out-of-cost expenses were paid for by donation. So I know how to do that part, but I can't task Terry to go out. I'm not going to ask her, hey, can you go out to so-and-so's office and go meet with them and see what their question is or their problem is. That's not. It's for her to line it up for me to go.
Well, one of my concerns is that you can't do that. You can no longer delegate any authority to your assistant because the assistant is supervised by another office, and that's also another
Listen, we have
concern.
no problem you guys taking it back. I want that real clear today.
No, I didn't say that's where I was going.
Make the motion and I'll be
just
happy.
identifying the challenge. The challenge is you can't tell your assistant
I just would like that
what
clear.
to do. You can't ask your assistant to do certain
I
things.
got an idea. We'll move Dory down to our office full-time.
Yeah, but better ask Dory.
Well, actually, you could ask her how she'd like that.
No, I'm just joking. Well, we've had a lively discussion.
Yes. And I'm sure now that we've had kind of taken everybody's input in and look at how to increase, I think, to me, the minutes, they have their earphones on playing those tapes back, and I know every time I interrupt, if it was me trying to listen to that tape, and I'd put up a, do not disturb sign, but they don't do that. They allow you to interrupt them, and it's, but I try not to do it.
We're going to look at all. I think we need to look at all that. That is a good point, and a lot of people, when we contracted Rita to do it, I think it really helped, and we'll look at talking to the clerk of the circuit court too. That might be an avenue, and contracting with them on some of that, and we'll look at outside. We'll look at all that you brought up today, because I think these are, I can see people getting stretched, and we can work with you.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is that it, Commissioners? Well, thank you. All right, we'll move on to special districts and boards. The first and only item is the Solid Waste Disposal District, change order number 1 to Paul Joaquin and Sons, Incorporated, bid number 2012051 for the new Oslo Customer Convenience Center project, memorandum dated May 31st, 2013, found on pages 114 through 122.
Move staff recommendation,
Second.
but with a comment.
I have a motion on the floor by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by myself, and a comment, Commissioner O'Brien.
Yeah, just, Vinnie, I was actually at the center over the weekend and looking at the work going on. They are making progress, but in the backup report it says the new center will open in mid-June. Mm-hmm. That's probably a little ambitious because that's about a week away, so it's probably more like July or August, I would guess.
Yeah, substantial is a month after that, July 22nd. Okay. So there was a portion of that was supposed to be the 22nd deadline, but yes, there's still a lot of work to do.
Yep. No, second. Did we have a second?
You can take a second.
Okay. And Benny, whenever it's your birthday, if you'll let me know, we'll move your item up in the agenda too. You don't have to sit out there all day.
But that for next year?
Whenever your birthday is, just let me know. I'll move it up under consent.
There was one other thing that due to the heavy rains, just with the tropical storms, there could be a couple other days of delay that as a result from the additional rains. Right. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. It's a motion on the floor by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Davis. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, one last thing. For those of you who haven't driven out there, the GO line has been relocated. It's working well out at the Vero Airport. Looks nice. Buses are getting out very efficiently and on time and on schedule. But for those of you who haven't been out there or been on the GO line lately, take a ride, go out there and take a look at the operation. It's working real well. And that's hopefully an 18-month situation, and then we can move those covered spots to some other places throughout the county once the new facility's open.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Meeting adjourned.